This week, we are live from my porch. A couple of reasons for this. I guess I wanted to give a little bit of ghetto Dry Creek Wrangler energy, but also I'm in the process of moving into the guest house, soon to be called the Shaman Shack. Don't love it, but this is where I'm moving, and we're halfway through the move. Like all moves, it's going to take about triple the amount of time. I'm a little surprised. We've got 26 people in the chat. I'm aware it's Thanksgiving weekend, but maybe some of you want to spend less time talking to your family. I don't know. Unfortunately, this is the only weekend that's left of the year to do it because we're basically at the end of the year, if you haven't noticed. So consequently, I'm going to do my year in review. And I'm going to do it in such a way that allows you to take what you can or what you need from that process for your own. And then we're going to finish off with which parts we take to the next year, 2024. And of course, because it's a live Q&A, well, there's a live Q&A at the end. So if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, there won't be a Q&A. Jump into YouTube and we'll have linked up whenever that Q&A actually starts. But hello to the people in the chat. Laurie, I owe you an email. Sorry about that. Long story. All right. So, yeah, it's the end of November. And consequently, it's the end of 2023. And I've been thinking about what we do with years in review. I wrote years ago on the blog, so this is Christmas and what have you done is one of those lines. Everyone who's been a shop girl, everyone who's had retail experience is Vietnam traumatized by certain Christmas songs. Fortunately, I probably could listen to Mariah forever, so that one didn't necessarily damage me as much as so this is Christmas and what have you done? Another year over, a new one just begun. And that's quite accusatory, and I've always hated it. And I'm aware that it comes from like a after the end of history style moment of like, oh, I'm wasting my life away in late capitalism with my cubicle job and so on. But here we are at the end of 2023, and a stable cubicle job sounds pretty fucking good, right? So it's a mismatch to the energy, but I've always quite liked its accusatory nature as a instigator of, well, what have I done actually? What the fuck have I done this year in general? And the thing I've been sitting with all year, and this will come up, is a year in review rather than an accusatory, so what have you done? Nothing. Bubkiss, your disappointment to your parents, blah, 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 is an invitation to reframe, to like healthfully reframe for next year. Because as you know, I think that's probably one of the more powerful, I guess, mental techniques, mental body techniques, manifestation, new thought techniques is the reframe. And so that's the overall idea, is to come out of this review process with some reframes to take into the following year. And the macro idea there, as I suppose, is quite stoic. Like it's quite Marcus Aurelius to convince yourself that everything that happens and that everything you get is a gift from the gods. That's a macro reframe. That's a really powerful one because obviously, famously, he buried a bunch of his kids. He lived through plagues and wars, and you know the Stoic stuff. And one of the things he decided to do, and we would call it a reframe, is to say that all of these are gifts from the gods. And it doesn't mean to not feel loss. It doesn't mean to not feel sadness and unhappiness and pain and so on, but to have a sufficiently sophisticated metaphysics or cosmology to see these things as gifts from the gods. And I like that. And that's what we're going to do rather than like, what have you done? Bubkiss, you know? And that's the second part of that process. And perhaps it's just because I'm a little bit too superstitious. So we want to reframe, but we don't actually want to set intentions until next year. We're still in the energy of 2023. 2024, going to be worse, right? But it's going to be different. And I want you to hold off and give it a month or so to reframe in the different categories we're talking about and let them develop into what your intentions and goals are for next year when we're actually in the new year. Obviously, if you're a premium member, we'll be doing the group contract clearing and other stuff at the beginning of the new year to set some energetics around it. I might do some public stuff. It depends. Depends on, frankly, how much time I have. But I might do some, we will at least do a show. But I've been dabbling with the idea of doing more public group journey and guided journey stuff as well. That's more when we get to it, setting intentions in and around career and so on. And I don't much care for the word career when it comes to goal setting. I've got 5 categories. So we're going to begin here with how I am assessing my 2023. And I call them goal areas because that sounds so annoying. It still sounds a bit too HR, but it's honestly the least HR term that I could think of for what we're talking about. And so the first one, the term that I've upgraded from career is vocation or calling. Because when we call it career, we do get trapped in that another year over and what have you done situation of like, oh, well, I'm still in my fullback job because my, whatever it happens to be, Etsy store, OnlyFans, I don't know. My side hustle has yet to flourish into main hustle. And so it's quite unfair. And in fact, I had a client last week who is making that transition to a full-time dream job out of a frankly quite successful career that supports the creative endeavor. And I've made that transition myself, where there's a lot to sit with of like, well, I'm grateful to be moving out of the day job, but I'm also kind of proud of the day job. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do, especially in 2023, to climb a corporate ladder in a desirable area like entertainment media or what have you. So there's a lot to sit with that doesn't factor into career. And vocation and calling is better because it invites a reframe around, well, on what level have I progressed this forward? Because you might get to the end of the year and go, still in the day job, still only have 14 OnlyFans. I don't know why I'm stuck on this, but that's what we're going with. You're now aspiring OnlyFans creators. But if you actually dig underneath what's happened in 2023, have you elaborated or firmed up or phrasing, otherwise developed the calling? So is it one of those situations, kind of like the apple trees I have in that direction, where some years they're going to put on root growth, which won't be visible. And it looks like, well, what the fuck's happened? Is it fucking stalled? And then the next year, because of that root growth, it gets more nutrients and it can grow top heavy. So career isn't the right word. Vocation and calling. And when we describe it thusly, we are going to reframe from gentleness, but not going to let you off the hook. So it's all well and good, especially as, I don't know if you've noticed, but shit is fucking expensive. If you're still in a reasonably well-paying side hustle main job that is supporting your side hustle, your creativity, congratulations, all right? Because it's fucked. There's no other, that's my economic expert opinion. The world is fucked. And if you have a job that is paying bills here at the end of 2023, well done. So it's bigger than just career. And you can't be like, I didn't get my OnlyFans. I didn't get my lesbian Cornish B&B up and running yet. It's like, yeah, fine. But look at the world and what actually have you done? This is the invitation to reframe from a position of gentleness and with a metaphor of roots and shoots, I suppose. And that's quite important, I think, because we typically bring the phraseology of American late stage capitalism to success, and it misses, frankly, most of the most important stuff. So that's what I want you to think of from a goal areas in vocation rather than career. The other ones are, I guess, self-explanatory. Health, adventures, that's a Gordon specific one, but I will explain why I think that applies to everyone and why you should consider looking at what you've done this year from the angle of adventures. Magic, That's a Rune Soup one. If you're listening to this, you've probably got that as one of your categories. And I've got consumed media 2023. It's something like that. It's inspiration. And we'll get to it, because I tell you what, hasn't been a good year for film. There's been a couple of good TV shows, read some good stuff, seen a few live shows. We'll cover all of that. But I've just spent the last 3 or 4 days going, what the fuck was the best film that I watched this year? And if it's The Sound of Freedom, then I'm ready to say goodbye to 2023. Because at the moment, that's at the top of the list. Caveat being, did it come out in 2023? Because if you can just say, well, Gordon, didn't you watch Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit this year? Of course I did. Doesn't count. What came out this year? Actually, we'll just do it now. I didn't see Oppenheimer or Barbie because I have zero interest in either of them. And that's why, I don't know, like I'm left with Sound of Freedom. And it's not that it was bad. It's whatever. We'll get to it later. Or maybe we won't. How about that? Right. So those are the areas, right? I want to begin with my career vocation. And this is an interesting one because, I mean, this is what I do. At the end of last year, and I mentioned this in the foundations, which I will also mention in this section, a couple of the goal areas or development areas that I wanted to take into this year was post more, care less, which I got from Catherine Manning. And one of the reframes we talk about in the foundations is have to get to. So it is, what time is it now? 8:12 a.m. on a Saturday morning. It's kind of gloomy. I mean, it's nice, but it's kind of gloomy. I'm a little bit scattered because I had a weird dosage reaction to a new addition to my supplement stack. So I'm quite dizzy and lightheaded. I'm fine. It's just that it has a 24-hour half-life. So I'm scattered, didn't sleep that well. I'm up early. And one of the ways you can look at that is, I can't believe I have to get up early on a Saturday morning to do a live stream. You turn that into get to, right? I can't believe I get to get up, speak to these people, share stuff that's on my mind, have people respond to it positively or not, but have people go, wow, thanks, I'm going to take that to my own year review, and so on. And it's a have to get to, and post more careless are sub versions of a general creative pivot that 2023 afforded me. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with keeping to post more careless. I put a blog post out the other day about jumping back on X. Yes, I'm calling it X. It's just me and Elon at this point, but why not? Jumped back on X in about April, and it was fun because it's just a mess now. There's no, well, the shrill mobs still using it, but they no longer, the pylons don't work there anymore. But they're still there because, what a shock, no one followed them to Mastodon or Threads. Anyway, that's not a pro Elon statement. That's more like no, this is a hot mess and got to pass the time somehow, and it falls under post more careless. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with creating more. The podcast numbers have grown. The YouTube numbers have grown. The Twitter numbers have as well. Oh, X, sorry. I did just say I was going to call it that, which is, I mean, not much. I think there was about 100. There wasn't a growth strategy, put it that way. It was more a post more careless, fuck around strategy. And that kind of worked. So at a directional level or a thematic level, I'm reasonably happy on a vocation perspective of how that went. Now, to get more specific about quote unquote career things that I actually accomplished this year, I want to talk about two main ones, I suppose. The foundations course, which took up the first 6 months of the year, and I'm really proud of it. And I'm really proud of everyone going through it, and the feedback and the responses and the questions and actual net contributions that people who've gone through the course have done. And it's just been really gratifying to get about 100 people all up saying like, no, this is really good. Congratulations. Because it is the best foundations or beginning of magic course that's out there in the English language anywhere. And I don't say that like, yay, like Kanye, like, yay, I'm the best. I mean, it's, if anything, it's a call for other creators to do at least as good. Like, does that make sense? But I'm nevertheless proud of it because it was a new course format. It was a new visual language. It was trying to get across things that wouldn't fit in previous modes of course delivery, which is very slide heavy, very PowerPoint heavy, which suits things that are deeply historical, like grimoires or what have you, but less so when it's trying to capture, well, let's imagine you're here and we're just going about our lives together, and I kind of point out or show you things I do when it comes to doing magic, and share them on that level, not like, haha, this is the secret of all Western magic, but it's more like, these are the foundations of how I do magic. And so I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of how that went, and it's going to fundamentally change a lot of how we deliver course material going forward. So if you are unaware, in Q1 of next year, so really only in about a month or so's time, we're beginning prayer as the Q1 course. And that's going to not look exactly like the foundations, but it's going to be inspired and have a similar, the shape and the format of it is going to be inspired by the foundation. So I'm quite looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the course in general, actually. That one was a surprise vote choice. I honestly expected the members to pick the Necronomicon, which they did not. It was overwhelmingly prayer. And once the results came in, I'm like, no, actually, that's right. And now I'm excited for it, which I am. So if you're not a member yet, join and learn about prayer. The other thing that came out this year is Fortune's Fools. That's a weird one for me because I actually finished my part of it the end of last year, literally December 31. The artwork, this is going to sound like, it's going to sound mean. Art is ready when it's ready, but that wasn't until April. And so I wanted that done in the first half of this year so that I would have the second half of this year to do the book, the final of the Dot trilogy. That didn't work. But I'm nevertheless happy to have that out in the world. I think there's 18 copies of the 1,000 print run left. So basically by the end of the year, which feels right, by the end of the year, the whole project is closed completely. If you're in the top 36 funders, by the end of the year, at least as far as I know, it was something Colin sent down to us, and then James is taking care of it, the final posters. But I'm really happy to have that out in the world, and I'm really happy to see people sharing pictures and telling stories of how the cards are working for them, because in general, Lenormand is quite spicy, and obviously you get to reasonably online gaze in the driver's seats. Well, I can actually drive. I have no idea if Colin can, so that makes me rare amongst my people. But that turned it even spicier, and it's to the point it's rude. It's like having a sassy drag queen friend, and I'm super happy to see that in people's hands and in people's lives. And it's a funny milestone for a job like mine, which doesn't really exist, or specifically hasn't existed for maybe 1,500 years. But to have your own card deck out in the world is one of those Aleister Crowley weight kind of thing. Not that I'm putting myself in that category, obviously. I just mean like, oh, cool. Like that's a feather in the career cap for me, since we're in that section. But I'm I'm very happy to have that out in the world. I'm very happy that and I'm very happy that it's contributing to people's discovery of Lenormand, because the reclamation of oracles, oracle decks, and dare I say proper oracle decks, which is ones that have a little bit of gray hair on them. I mean, this is only mid 1800s, but nevertheless belong to, I would say, a cunning or continental, or a cunning and continental magical lineage, one that falls outside of the for better and mostly worse Anglo-American Golden Dawn reorganization appropriation project, which I have called previously the nonsense line. Not that I don't use it, but it is one thing that happened in history. It's not the history of magic. So I'm very happy to be a small participant in the moment that Lenormand is getting in the sun. And one of the things that I'm proudest of, that I would suppose that Colin and I did with that project, is to center Madame Lenormand herself, Marianne Adelaide Lenormand, or Lenormand, because she didn't, this is the thing you learn about Lenormand cards. It's like, oh, she didn't create them. She had nothing to do with them. That's so fucking unfair. And it is a example of the sort of thing, and it's weirdly political, that happens to women in history and that we know happens in magical history. So we've restored, and rightly so, Smith Waite is what we now call, what used to be called the Rider-Waite deck. Like Pamela Coleman Smith's name wasn't even fucking on it. And now we've reversed it and I think done it correctly, which is put her name first. But that's the same thing that happened to Madame Lenormand. She didn't create the deck. No. But it was, the deck got its name because she grew to be the most famous fortune teller in Europe. So if she was alive today, that would be a copyright violation, you know, intellectual property, using her likeness and all the rest of it. And the reason it's called that is because of the fucking career she had. So it's not sufficiently fair to say she had nothing to do with it. No, she just had that whole fucking crazy ass life that she did, which included being in prison twice, having her books unpublished and banned so that she spent her own money to buy a printing press in Paris to keep publishing her books. This is, when we talk about girl bosses, unfortunately, it's a horrible Netflix mess these days. But if you're looking for an original magical girl boss, that's her. And so I'm really happy that we've been able to bring that story into the center of Lenormand for a while, at least, so that people understand that there's another way of saying she had nothing to do with it. That's deeply unfair. It's like Kleenex had nothing to do with facial tissues. Really? Because I kind of think they did. That's why we call them Kleenexes. Or if you're English, Hoovers for vacuum cleaners. It's the same kind of situation. Well, I think Kleenex had something to do with facial tissues. So Lenormand is the Kleenex of Oracle cards, and I'm glad that we actually have an opportunity to do that in a spicy way, rather than, and this is what I mean by like the horrible 2023 version of Girl Boss, is like, oh, all right, this is so painfully oatmeal, right? This is so painfully worthy. But if you make it, I don't know, sassy, if you come at it from like a gay, almost drag direction, then there's the opportunity to be sufficiently spicy without making it worthy, without making it like, no, you know, this is important that we center, marginalize, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this, the way of seeing this is she was spicy enough to arrange a deck named after her own death. That's the way into it. So very happy that that's out in the world. And in terms of the podcast, reasonably happy. There was a couple of different format changes. This is sort of one of them that we instigated at the beginning of the year. Well, actually halfway through the year, that I'm pretty happy with. There have been some signal interruptions on account of extended travel, where it's like, what I ultimately want to do is a solo show every second week and a guest show every other week. And we did that for a good couple of months. And it's probably going to be, hang on, what have I got lined up? It'll be about that towards the end of the year. And I've been quite happy with that. I've been quite happy with increasing the number of solo shows to deep dive on certain topics. Obviously, AI was the main one we did this year. And I think it'll be next week or the week after will be the AI solo show. But that project, that's the end or the final of the AI episodes to complete the year. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with doing a little bit more of the video situation. That's been more technological. That's been, I mean, now I can sit here we've got Starlink. I spent half the year not being able to upload, right? And now, thank you, Elon. This is the second time he's been mentioned. And I did he sort of implied in the AI thing. But we have Starlink down here now. So if I'm going to be irradiated from his flying robots, I might as well use them to upload this video. So there's been technological challenges that have had to be overcome that have allowed for a little bit more video, a little bit more of the presentations. And speaking of AI, different AI tools have been incorporated into the workflow less than I expected by the end of the year. I thought when we started incorporating them and we started using ChatGPT to build out different parts of the website, and I started moving off PowerPoint to different versions of like AI slide creators, I thought, oh, honestly, by the end of the year, I'll probably just speak what I want as an outline into some kind of deck creator, and it will do it. Fuck off. That hasn't even slightly happened. So it's improved our workflow somewhat and has been had a meaningful contribution, I would say, right across both James and my businesses. But it hasn't what I expected. And that's the general shape of innovation. Like, we overestimate, this is a Bill Gatesism, we overestimate its impact in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. It's certainly not a fad. We are certainly moving in that direction. But everything else, the mobile internet, the wired internet, they all went through that. Oh, this is going to be everything. Nope, turns out it's kind of shit. And then in the medium term gets sort of good. So I've been pretty happy with that. I'm keeping an eye on it. I would suggest, coming back to career and vocation, you guys do the same. It's not going anywhere. So it's one of those moments in I guess, the history of work where things come along like computers. And it's like, should I learn how to use a computer? Should I take a night course learning how to use like an Apple 2GS? That seems crazy because my job, I work in a lumberyard or whatever. And no, that would have been the right move in the 80s. And this is a similar situation. Being the AI person, or knowing what the AI tools are in the world and having an indication of where they're going to impact your vertical, it's probably a good idea. AI filming. Oh, we got a new editor. That was the other thing that happened. That's been good. Because of which we'll get to when we get to the travel and adventure and health stuff, the signal interruption in Paraguay, I didn't get to use the editor for the high volume of vlogs that I intended to do, which we're really only just getting to start now, I suppose. I did one this week. There's 2 coming out next week. So pretty happy to finally get there. And I suppose I could count that as a win for 2023, but I did expect to be doing that from about May. Some of it was technological, like I said. Nevertheless, if I can get 4 vlogs out by the end of the year, and a vlog is going to, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet. In fact, someone in the Telegram group, which you can sign up to below, mentioned this, that there wasn't a blog post on runesoup.com pointing out, oh, I put a new vlog up. And there isn't, because I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. Like, if I want it to be a YouTube specific format, like maybe you should just subscribe on YouTube. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Or it folds into one of the other things that I've done this year, which again fell by the wayside with the Paraguay health incident, is to do like a Sunday newsletter. We will probably by the end of the year have Substack, a free option, obviously, have Substack as a subscribe-based option, so that everything, each time, particularly the podcast and the weekly newsletter, each time that goes out, if it's more convenient, because a bunch of you, I don't care, a bunch of you use Substack, specifically like the app, where you're getting a whole bunch of your content. It's like, I don't care, wherever you want it, that's fine. Phrasing. I'm not going to make it a paid option. That will never happen. People have asked that over the years. Can I use PayPal? Can I use Patreon? Can I look at all the creators coming off these things? Remember, that was my background. Everyone's like, yay, Patreon's great. Patreon took all my fucking money and doesn't deliver the technical capacities that I need. This is what independent creation looks like. It just is. Nevertheless, people who want to use Substack to consume their content, I don't mind. It's just that we have other more urgent digital projects. But hopefully by the end of the year, if that's a thing you're interested in, I can tick that off as part of the overall business transformation. I'm also going to be finally in the next series of Magical Egypt, which is out possibly this weekend. There was some audio syncing issues. I was talking to Venice, one of the producers and hosts, the other day. Now, this series, they're calling it 4 years in the making, which I suppose is true. But like, I literally did my interviews in 2020 because we were all still trapped in Australia, and I had to fly up. I was the only one not wearing a mask because it was still optional on the plane heading up and down. Literally, on the way back, there was 3 or 4 of us not wearing them. On the way up, I flew the flag of basic sanity, and that felt really good. Not the point of this. The point is, Magical Egypt and John Anthony West and Robert Schoch and all of that were huge parts of my adolescent becoming of a weirdo. And so it's so exciting that I'm actually in the series, right? That's one of those weird things that I never thought would happen to me career-wise. Now I'm going to take that win in 2023. I could have really done with it in 2020 because that was, I mean, look at it now. When I said this health narrative is going to be used to push through digital currencies and passports in a process that will lead to World War III and the ultimate divorce of the United States. And people said some really fucking horrible things, slanderous, wrong things. And now here we are, and all that stuff is fucking happening. But yeah, no, I could have done with a change of the narrative in 2020 there. Nevertheless, I'll take the win here in 2023 when all of those stupid cunts have shut their stupid fucking cunt mouths because it all is happening. Anyway, very, very proud to be part of that, to be part of that lineage. That's because Magical Egypt and John Anthony West, with his original book, did something which most of you guys will know this, but it's quite important because it's in like this long history of Hermeticism, where he managed to pass Schuyler de Lubitsch's symbolist metaphysics of how Egypt works into a wider audience because he was very French, and it was very French. But it's also in a lineage of, I would argue, the true lineage of Egypt, which is that esoteric line that includes Athanasius Kircher, who had his own version of how hieroglyphs work that wasn't actually word to word accurate, but he nevertheless could use it to be predictive. And the cosmic or metaphysical role of Egypt as not just mirror of the cosmos, because this is the same thing, mirror of the psyche, and to engage with Egypt is to engage with the cosmos and the psyche, and that's what it's for. And we knew that in the classical age. We knew that Egypt was the home of magic, and so what John Anthony West did with his book and bringing the symbolist notion into his books and then into Magical Egypt and so on is actually part of that Hermetic project. Like, it's downstream from the Hermetic moment of bundling up the silverware, which is what I call it when, you know, Egypt moves into its fall, and all of those jewels are taken and scattered into astrology, into the Moorish Empire, all that kind of stuff. When it's scattered, it's in that same lineage. So it's lovely to be downstream from that. It's lovely and like a really beautiful career moment that I'm grateful for, that's happening. I guess that's the main stuff. The other thing, and this is negative, I don't know, failure, transformation. There we go. Still going on the reframes. Is the final of the book trilogy. Now, because of all this other stuff, like the delay in, and it's weird to call it a delay. When you work on creative projects, you'll know this, obviously. Wizards are never late, neither are creative projects. Actually, that's not quite true. But we could have forced a worse product out early, or so did Fortune's Fool come out exactly as it was supposed to, as the exact right kind of product? The answer to that is yes. So when I say it's late, it was more that I had the expectation that I would have more of this year to work on the final. I keep wanting to, but I want to do like the reveal of the name of the book a little bit later. So I keep going to name the book, and I'm not going to do that. But I was anticipating having more of the year to work on it. And that's not going to happen. So I wanted the book completed to first draft stage by the end of next month. That absolutely is not going to happen. I'm about a third of the way through, I would say, based on my word count. And then I wanted January to touch it up and then get it to Scarlet Imprint at the end of January. That's not going to happen. The big reason that's not going to happen, am I at Health and Adventures? No, is, I'll do it now, and then we'll talk about Paraguay later. So this life is busier than it seems. And it's one of the reasons for the health journey that began in 2020 that wound up more or less last year. And we're on a different one that I'll explain when we get to the health section. it is very difficult to find in and amongst having clients and the membership and the podcast and the farm obligations and the rest of it, the time it takes to dedicate to a book. To the point that the last time I had a proper job, I managed to write 2 books at once while still having a director level international job. So I was global data director for Time Out whilst writing Chaos Protocols and Star.Ships at the same time. And I managed to get them done within a year. It's a bit weird when it's your first book. Like Star.Ships, arguably, I'd been working on for 20 years, coming back to the magical Egypt discussion, right? Because it's thoughts and adventures that I'd been having over 20 years. But nevertheless, the writing of it and of my Llewellyn book all happened in and amongst having a director level job. So when I say that there's no time here, I know what I'm talking about, and I know I know what being busy is. And usually I get people, this is a really good example, and if this was you, please don't take it the wrong way. People say, you need to be careful with burnout. I'm like, oh, really? So every time I try to take a day to write, I get emails from members or whoever going, oh, I can't find this, or my login doesn't work, or like all of these things, which is, I'm grateful to do. Like that's literally the job. That takes the priority over it. But everyone seems to think this is not a normal life, which brings me to the thing I like most in the world when it comes to, I want to call it holiday, but that's not exactly it. Restoration of soul is I like to spend a month to 6 weeks writing my gay little books in some Latin country that has cantinas or whatever, where I can toddle off with my laptop or my iPad and go and sit somewhere weird and hot and Latin and work on the book. And the only way I can get first drafts done is to basically nope out of this life for a little while to get the draft done, and then I can come back and fix it. And with what went on in Paraguay, which I'll get to later, I didn't get those 2 months. So now I'm back and I cannot take that time off anymore, because that's quite a bit of time to take out of someone's life. We also don't have the money for it because travel is fucking expensive. So I'm stuck. And this is, I'm not going to leave that word there it is because we're reframing, but I'm back in this beautiful life for which I am grateful, that does not in its current iteration have any room to finish a book. And I don't know what I'm going to do about that. This comes back to Fortune's Fools and all the rest of it. The book will be done when it's done. I'm really racing to get it out before effectively World War III, because there's going to be a period in the 2025 to 2027 range where you won't be able to print stuff, nor will you be able to ship stuff, as far as I can tell. So I wanted it out. And I also, if you guys, I was talking to Austin about this with the re-release of 36 Faces. He's got a bunch of other book projects he wants to do as well, but he has to get that one done first. If you have a creative job, you'll appreciate that certain things just have a sequence. Like I want to do different projects to do with the heart healing journey and so on that don't fit in the Scarlet Imprint book, which is creatively more important and just generally more of a priority to complete that wider dot trilogy project. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that. I don't need to know what I'm going to do about that. Every time I check the cards on it, it's like, just relax, you stupid fucking idiot. Just enjoy Christmas. When the monstrous Q1 comes around, because there's some space whether this isn't going to be good, different things will be clear at that point that will open up the when and the how of the book. I'm like, all right, fair enough. So in the vocational area, it isn't anywhere near done, which is disappointing on one level. But coming back to this idea of reframing, the book will not be written by the person who thought he could plan so precisely through an apocalypse. Let's say it like that. When you're doing this stuff, I'm going to do, this is one of the vlogs that's coming up next week. I'm going to do a vlog about when we did the sigils course. We talked about what if all magic spells work? And there's a number of ways you can look at that so that they reduced, and this is the best way of doing it, that they massage the probability, but you still dropped a 1 in a million down to a 1 in 1,000 and it didn't come off. Another route into that thinking is how we sit with magical failures. Like we enchanted for someone to, let's just use a bad example, fall in love with us and they don't. And they, like, that didn't happen. So you have a binary of like, well, did it work? No. The weird thing, and you will have noticed this, and it gets better the more you lean into it, which will be the point of the vlog. If you reframe towards, well, the cosmos, this is the real trickster energy. The cosmos delivers me failure to strengthen my capacity to be able to achieve the thing that I wanted anyway. And you get caught in this strange level of like, well, then what's even the point of magic? Which is a great and meaty and unanswerable metaphysical question, frankly, because it depends on what level you're addressing it from. So that's what I mean by I am inviting myself to reframe not having the first draft done by the end of 2023 as a necessary reformulation of the person who has to write the book to make the book the thing that it needs to be. I hope you followed that. I hope that made sense. It's quite early here. So I'm all right with that. I'm all right with the fact that it's not done. It does concertina stack some projects into next year, but you know, that's next year's problem. That's the career vocation. And I hope those examples were useful from a reframe perspective. Health. This has been a fucking interesting year for health, right? So the heart healing journey officially wound up. It was a 2-year process of decline and up. And it's more like, well, that wound up last year, but it's more like something I sit with at Bio Komalafe says, what does it mean to fall into sickness? And also this idea that you get fixed from anything, right? From, I had a depressive episode to, I had a severe infection to whatever. The idea that you are fixed from anything isn't quite right, because the psychic and to sometimes physical scars not just stay with you for life, but you are the expression of them. So when you go on a major health journey, you come to understand health outside of an allopathic machine universe model where it's like, oh, you have an owie, take this chemical. Anyway, be all that as it may, the heart healing journey from a magical perspective wound up last year. And this year's health goal was, I guess you could call it, address root causes, which in my case would be autonomic dysregulation in the direction of the sympathetic. Too much stress, too much anxiety as a constitutional component, rather than, which is true of everyone. That's why you want to solve at a root cause level. Too much stress or anxiety in one's life, sure, but even if you remove them, if you are autonomically dysregulated and predisposed to anxiety and stress, then you're going to remain in a sympathetic state, which is going to have those that has poor health prognoses across everything: cancer, heart, just general early death, right? So this was a year of addressing root causes in the direction of autonomic regulation. And I have to say, it's been mostly quite successful. That was the umbrella for going 1 year off booze. And I think I'm going to end up having a drink at a Christmas drinks in a couple of weeks' time. So it won't be a full 12 months, but whatever, 11 and change still counts. But the reason I did that last year was watching a Andrew Huberman podcast, this 2-hour thing about everything that's wrong with alcohol. And we know most of them, like it's a poison, like that's not a surprise. But it will essentially upregulate your sympathetic system for up to 30 or 40 days after even a single drink. So this idea that you will never fully get back to not even a baseline, but sufficiently deep into the parasympathetic state, if there's any alcohol in your system, of like if the liver is processing through anything, was for me, okay, cool. Well, I'll take this. I wasn't even drinking that much. This is weird. Everyone has to say that when they go off alcohol. Now, there were years where I definitely drank very heavily, and we'll get to like the overall health journey later. When you work in food media in London, like when we left London, we were drinking every day, still smoking. I was significantly overweight. Which we'll get to a little bit later. So it's not that I haven't spent years drinking very heavily, but last year, and the last couple of years before this year, it was quite light drinking by Western standards, like once every couple of weeks. So it wasn't like, that's it. I didn't wake up the sprinkler in my neighbor's yard didn't wake me up at 6 a.m. because I'd been on a 5-day bender, and I'm like, that's it, I'm quitting booze, right? It was okay. Well, if it slightly elevates me, I'm going to cut out alcohol this year. And holy shit, was that amazing! I will obviously I was never going to go back to heavy drinking, but moving into next year, I'm going to view alcohol like the devil's ayahuasca, in the sense that it's something I might do 4 times a year, and only on the special occasion of I'm visiting friends, they're coming to visit me, Christmas, that kind of thing. I have no interest in it. My life is so much better without it. If you are thinking of doing it, life-changing, right? And I did it for that reason, which is super interesting because, well, I did it for the autonomic regulation reasons, let's say that. And so the journey of health this year has been pretty much entirely in that direction. And it got weird. So when I was in the Philippines, I had a faith healer paralyze half of my face. Like, I got facial palsy. And this is a really good example of when, like, my mother freaked out. It's like, you need to go and get antibiotics and whatever. I'm like, why? Like, play that out. And it was literally the afternoon after my first faith healing. And I knew what it was, which was that was about 6 or 8 weeks, let's say 6 weeks after quitting drinking. And I knew, because I could feel that energetically, that it actually had something to do with the liver finally having room to basically complete some backed up detox to do with the autonomic system. And then when it went up the next day to see Annie Ponce, by the way, you can find her if you go to Sikihor, and she's highly recommended. Do you want your face paralyzed? Go for it. I went up the next day or the day after, and she asked, what's wrong with your face? And I half lied, because they use a sacred oil. And he said, I think I had a negative reaction to the oil, and so one side of my face is paralyzed. And she looked at me like only half believing. Oh, sorry. And I say, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's forcing me to slow down, which is true. I was filming the foundations as well as doing research for the book, which is why I was there. And she looked at me and said, yeah, you have too much stress. And she had that Galadriel look when she said the word stress. She looked me in the eyes and said, yeah, it's to do with stress. And it was like this magical projection of like, stop stressing, which was what the health journey, the facial palsy, actually did, because I had to like hold up half my mouth to get the toothbrush in to brush my teeth. So I couldn't speak properly. So I couldn't do magical training videos, because like I couldn't use my mouth, right? Which meant that half the work that I went to the Philippines to do, I couldn't do. So I went from what looked like a holiday, was actually more than 2 jobs, down to like 0.8 of one job whilst on holiday, which is my version of dramatically de-stressing. So strange things like that would happen. When I got to Paraguay, just continuing the health journey, whatever, am I at that yet? Booze, caffeine. Oh no, we'll do that one first. Took the year mostly off caffeine. And that's been really powerful as well. I have 1 coffee a week, or 1 coffee morning, let's say. And that means that I can go somewhere and have a nice coffee. And when you're desensitized to it, it's really psychedelic. Like, it's a beautiful substance that elevates the mood and elevates creativity and so on. Post Paraguay, and there's one of them here, drinking tereré, which is essentially mate. So there's caffeine in this, which means I'm back on caffeine, but this is a lower amount. This is like 1 to 300 rather than the 400 and up mics you get with coffee. And also it's a sustained release, because you put the yerba, I don't know, can you see that if I hide my mouth? Yep, in the cup, and you refill it with water throughout the day. So you're still only getting that 1 hit of caffeine that is slowly released. And obviously I don't drink it in the afternoon. It gets to about 2 p.m. and by then it's lost most of its flavor anyway. But I learned that process. It's really elegant in Paraguay, where they, well, not the whiter Latins, because they don't want to do anything that makes them look brown or ethnic. That weird institutionalized Latin racism is there, because the working class, because you'll see brown looking working class people in Paraguay with their guampa, which is this kind of cup, drinking it. The white people won't. They'll queue up at Starbucks at the one mall with a Starbucks in it and pretend to be us, which is gross and tragic. Anyway, so it's a really lovely and elegant kind of contribution to the day. You stay hydrated. There's a nice mate has energetic heart healing effects. It's just really pleasant. So my caffeine relationship as I get to the end of the year, I'm very happy with, because I've gone off the 4 or so morning cups of coffee, maybe more, and have allowed caffeine to be what it needs to be. I've returned coffee to being a psychedelic, and I have like a smoother relationship to a substance that is actually, I mean, caffeine's cardioprotective, caffeine's good for exercise. Most of you will know this. So it wasn't so much that caffeine's bad. It's more, if your health goal is autonomic regulation in the direction of the parasympathetic, you want to make sure that the caffeine, which is what it does, you're not heading in the wrong direction from a sympathetic perspective. And this lower sustained dose allows me, as far as I can tell, to get the caffeine benefits without impacting the health goals that I personally have. I'm not saying you shouldn't, you know this, right? I'm not saying you should do any of this. You should definitely take a year of alcohol. But when it comes to caffeine, you're on your own with that. that's you and the caffeine gods can make that decision. Dental. Okay, this is a weird one I haven't spoken about before. Flossing is a scam. And I came to this again looking at my autonomic dysregulation. In 2018, yes, I was down here on my own because James was coming once every second weekend. First time ever, 5 acres, running the business. That was the summer of the fires, arranging the So Below event with Austin in Melbourne. So lots of travel, lots of stress, lots of interpersonal drama. And I got really bad gum disease. I got, what's it called? What's the next step up from periodontitis? And so I went to a periodontist, Tasmania's only periodontist, and he said, "Have you been under some stress of late?" I laughed like, "Oh, I don't know." Yes. So learning that was quite helpful, that I had up until this year an indicator in my mouth of if I was too sympathetic, because I would get gum sensitivity, not full on like gum disease, but gum sensitivity. So I also went on a journey of actual dental health in a non-germ theory perspective, because that's all wrong. It's all fucking wrong. Mouthwash is associated with increased risks of heart disease and so on, but of course it is, because you are removing part of your bacterial assembly in the same way that antibiotics do that, right? We think, what, all of a sudden the bugs in our mouth are bad, but the ones in our gut are good. It's the same fucking pathway, right? So Listerine and all the rest of it, a scam in the same way that sunscreen is a scam. Any of these things are like late 19th, early 20th century industrial era scams. Obviously, if you're watching this or listening to this, you're aware that fluoride is not necessary. It's a fucking neurotoxin. Is it in the water with the other stuff turning the frogs gay? That's up to you, right? We have our own water. But it's a neurotoxin. And when I went, because I came back from a stressful trip to New Zealand and it was a bit bleedy again, I'm like, I'm going to go to the dentist. And she said, yeah, okay, you need to use more fluoride. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. It's a neurotoxin. And it suddenly occurred to me that this system is fucking broken as well. It's as broken as any other allopathic system. Now, why is flossing a scam? Because you are basically rubbing diseased and damaged tissue, which the bacteria are consuming, because that's what they do. That's what they always do in a non-germ theory model. You're re-damaging the sensitive skin that actually already has necrotic and dying tissue that's being cleaned up. So you're basically re-traumatizing it where the bugs are there to clean up the traumatized skin. So it's like, I remember having this discussion as a kid. I don't understand why we do this. By the way, I've never had a filling. So this is like, I'm not an anti-dentite, to use a classic Seinfeld term. I've never had a filling. My teeth have actually been pretty good. But I remember going, what if there's nothing in between my teeth? What are we flossing for? It just hurts. And there's a whole like holistic dentistry world where they're like, no, flossing is a scam. If there's stuff in between your teeth, obviously remove it. But we had the water blaster, and so my teeth would never have the opportunity to complete that bacterial consumption of the damaged tissue and heal properly, because you're just blasting it and re-traumatizing the actual tissue. What do you know? You stop flossing and you start, this is the other key, xylitol. You start using xylitol toothpaste, or just xylitol, and a little bit of coconut oil pulling, and you stop flossing, and what do you know? Your fucking gums stop bleeding. You actually, that suspended healing process has an opportunity to complete. The other thing, having just said all mouthwash is a scam, we make our own with hydrogen peroxide, obviously very low dose, which you don't use every day because that is going to nuke the mouth. But if you're like, holy shit, I've had persistent gum sensitivity, and you're jumping over to a new tab on YouTube now, which I recommend, xylitol, natural dentist, natural toothpaste, blah, blah, the usual search terms, right? If you're on that journey and you have gum sensitivity, there is a role for hydrogen peroxide at a low dose as a mouth rinse. Be careful, don't gargle it or anything, obviously, to bring the whole bacterial assembly down. And what xylitol as a natural sugar does is it's food for the more beneficial bacteria rather than the less beneficial ones, although I don't necessarily like those terms. But xylitol is a better food for your normal bacterial assembly. So that combination brings them all down, and the xylitol gives the quote-unquote good guys more of a running head start. So that's been great. I'm putting that one as a health success as well. As you step outside of germ theory in every direction, and all of a sudden things that look chronic heal. Just they're done, right? My fucking cardiologist doesn't want to see me anymore because he can't see me, because he wanted to give me like a triple fucking bypass. They were calling me once I checked myself out of hospital several years ago to make sure I wasn't dead. And one time they called me and, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm climbing in the Andes. Same thing with the periodontist. He's like, oh, well, you can't, you skipped a meeting. I was in another country. You didn't make it to an appointment, so you'll have to resubmit through your dentist. And I'm like, I'm good, actually. Like, it's fine. When you get out of the germ theory allopathic model, these things actually have an opportunity to complete. So, and the reason I'm telling you all of this in the overall context of the sympathetic system is I have a good indicator of when I am a bit dysregulated. So if there is some gum sensitivity, it's like, okay, cool. Because if you're unaware of this, there is a direct correlation between gum disease and gingivitis and dying of a heart attack, right? And there's a whole bunch of possible experimental pathways as to why that is. But the short answer is you have I think it's because it's an indication of a stress response. They'll say things like, well, you've got bacteria in the bloodstream, and so the body never properly heals. That's probably all true, but the bacteria in the bloodstream from a terrain theory perspective is they're doing something beneficial. If you have bacteria in the bloodstream, it's because there's actually something else in your system that requires them to be there. And that is what's putting you at an increased likelihood of a heart attack. So you have this really interesting indicator of where you are in terms of autonomic regulation. So that's why I'm telling that story. Other than it'll be relevant for some of you, like, what? Xylitol? What do you? I have been ripping my gums to shreds because my dentist told me, and just play this out in your head, because my dentist told me I've got bleeding gums. I need to floss every day. Well, how's that? It's like repicking a scab. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You are welcome. Go on that journey if that's for you. My little brother's a dentist, by the way, and whilst he's not necessarily on board with I call it Trump wash, my hydrogen peroxide rinse, he's following the rest of the logic. Body movement. Okay, so this was going quite good. The zone 2 stuff's gone really well. So I'm doing like, I don't know, 60, 70 kilometers a week of zone 2 walking, to the point where I have to start rucking now because it's kind of worked. But there's been a couple of times over the course of my heart healing or health journey in general. So when the heart healing journey began in late May, early June of 2021, I was closing in, amazing as I'm still only 27, on my 40th birthday. And I wanted to hit certain health goals before that, because why the fuck not? It's 40, it's a big deal. And then the heart things happened so that I couldn't do the body movement it was like muscle mass goals, that kind of stuff. And it was the closest I'd ever got to, not you, everyone knows this, like health isn't a destination, it's a journey, blah, blah, blah. It was the closest I'd ever got. And that suspended it for a couple of years. And it's happened a couple of times again this year, to the point that I have done some serious journeying work on what kind of fucking curse is going on here. And I've approached it differently, and I'm next year I'll tell you about. This also happened. The body movement physical goals for 2023 were disrupted by the serious illness in Paraguay, the serious infection situation, where it also suspended me for 2 months. Like as I was approaching my fucking goals, I'm like, oh, come on. Every time I get close, I get like the weirdest shit that happens that stops it. Turns out this comes back to magical failure. It's because I hadn't sufficiently pursued that stress root cause thing. So I haven't achieved full marks on the body movement health perspective goals, but I have otherwise and have not completely failed. I give myself about a 60% out of that. It just means that is one of the 2024 intentions, which I'm pretty happy about. It's coming into summer here, not that you'd know it. And this is a really fun place to be able to do that kind of stuff. But the body movement, and the reason I'm calling it that, is that's part of that overall autonomic regulation as well. Now, the Paraguay health journey. I remember a couple of years ago having a discussion with my acupuncturist about what situation she would ever consider antibiotics for herself or for a client. And it was, I ended up in that situation, essentially. She said, listen, if there was a risk of sepsis, then I would suggest or recommend antibiotics, and we deal with the microbiomal nuclear damage afterwards. So I hadn't had antibiotics for years. And even if and it was like a systemic sort of infection, bladder stuff and all kinds. And I hate using the word infection because that's not right. It's the presence of bacteria that are doing a cleanup, which was absolutely to be expected at that part of like a autonomic and even, dare I say, weight loss healing journey. That's what was supposed to happen. Had I been here in Tasmania, I might have flown to the mainland and had some intravenous vitamin C, which is actually what we used to do for sepsis, and is much preferable for, not that I had, but like there was a risk of sepsis, right? And I'm in South America's second poorest country. I don't speak the language. What am I going to, this is a health emergency. What am I going to do? Start ringing around with my non-existent Spanish going, do you do intravenous vitamin C? So I spent a few days in hospital on a bunch of different, because infectology is a cute word. That's I guess the Spanish word for infectious disease, because I got the head of infectology. She was lovely. So Paraguay is a very young country. Average age is like 28 or something. So everyone in the hospital was this like adorable, cute little twinks. It was so girl and boy twinks. So it just looked like it was a training hospital, but it wasn't. It's just that everyone was like 23, 24, adorable. And this woman who was the head of infectology, she would have been mid 40s. And just surrounded by, to my eyes, children. But she would come in and explain. They kept doing tests for different things. And I'm like, it's not that. It's not that. It's not that. But because they couldn't work out what it was, because germ theory is wrong, I couldn't have that conversation in Spanish either. They just gave me a bunch of different antibiotics. And I knew what was going to happen. It worked in the sense that it killed the bacteria. So what I think from a non-germ theory perspective happens with sepsis and why antibiotics help is that whilst the bacteria that are consuming the damaged tissue aren't bad for you, their toxic waste products are. So actually that you can die from things like sepsis because you still have a toxic load. And is that splitting hairs? Yes. This is one of the things that I have a problem with the terrain theorist of like, bacteria are never bad for you. So yes, but people die of sepsis and they say, but that's the waste products generated by the bacteria that are cleaning up the damaged tissue. And I'm like, well, that is splitting hairs at this point, isn't it? Because you will still die. So I ended up in the one situation where I would take antibiotics because I hadn't had them for years. And even just knowing it as these children, this is why I mentioned it, putting in the IV, and I did get a training nurse. She would have been at 17, and I still have the scar. That was only it was an extremely painful process all in all. Anyway, I had a good few days to realize, well, I guess I'm definitely going whole food plant-based. There are protocols in terms of high fiber prebiotics, having 30 plants a week. There's a bunch of stuff you can do and should, frankly, after antibiotics, and especially the amount of them that I took. So that's my, when we come back to how the autonomic journey ends. What I didn't realize, this is a separate video. My health goal for 2024, you know how like I quit booze this year. I won't be drinking that much next year, but I will. Alcohol is back on the menu to some extent next year. I'm going to go whole food plant-based for a year. And that's come out of how I'm eating now as a result of the microbiomal restoration. Because I went down some fairly significant rabbit holes to understand that there are foods that are powerful parasympathetic upregulators that are excluded from a low carb animal protein diet, which is what I used to lose, let's say, 2/3 of the weight. But one of the reasons I went pursue root causes autonomic dysregulation this year is, like I said, we were very overweight when we got down here, like years of daily drinking and food media and smoking and just London life. It's one of the reasons we came down here, to not die, right? And we were very overweight. And so I lost, like, let's say 2/3 of the weight doing low carb, because that's what always worked for me. It worked when I was 19 or whatever. And then I got to, this might sound, for you skinny legends out there, that might actually sound like a lot of weight. Like, once I got to within 20 pounds, so sitting in the 15 to 20 pounds of goal weight, it stayed like that for 18 months. Like, you bring it down and it just stopped. And I would take more and more out of the diet, and I would do a month of just meat, like just red meat, like 3 weeks of just pure nothing but steak. And if you've ever been in nutritional ketosis from the carnivore direction, it's like being a vampire on speed. You no longer feel human. You have unbelievable concentration powers. But it turns out that's because you were sympathetically upregulated. Like, it's caffeine or speed or ADHD medication, which is the same thing, right? And I didn't enjoy it. Like, right? It was working in the sense of weight loss until it hit this final 20 pounds, which only comes off if you can, well, if you are autonomically dysregulated in the direction of the sympathetic, you're more likely to retain, particularly that first 20 pounds of weight, which was obviously what was going on. So I went whole food plant-based since I got back, and it's the same amount of calories, and I'm losing like the rest of that weight. And it's not even like I'm eating less. It's like, oh, so no, you were actually secretly in like you weren't in a calorie deficit. I'm like, I know what I'm doing with this. Like, ask a fucking fat person who's lost weight how many calories are in something. Okay, this idea that I wasn't, and it was actually causing me considerable stress, because I would go back and see like my ECP therapist in New Zealand, and again, this is something that people who've been on a weight loss journey will understand. They think you're lying. They think that, like, and that would cause me serious psychic distress, because I give everything up out of my life and eat foods that I didn't especially enjoy, and it still wouldn't work. And I'm like, what do it would make you weirdly, I had a moment, like a panic attack, anxiety moment in Auckland in July, where I was basically suicidal, but in a weird way. Like, these thoughts were suicidal in my head of, you should just fucking kill yourself. What's the fucking point? And it was like, I wasn't feeling that. I was hearing voices, right? Like, it was that edge of having some kind of panic attack, where I understand why for centuries we would consider that demonic, because it was my voice, but it wasn't me saying it, but it was loud in my head. Unfortunately, you have that, oh shit, like I'm obviously having an anxiety or some kind of episode. So I wasn't in danger of killing myself, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm hearing my own voice in my head telling me you should fucking kill yourself. What's the fucking point? Like, wow, okay, that's some dysregulation. Anyway, so that's the story of the health thing this year. Has turned out to be quite good in strangely accidental ways, where had I not had a serious health emergency in Paraguay that interrupted delivering the book, I would not have gone on the antibiotic diet journey that led me to the kind of foods that upregulate the parasympathetic system, which will lead me to, when we get to December 31, declaring the autonomic regulation project a success. Because I went 2-3 days on the new eating regime, which is all these foods that I used to crave, that James can't stand because he has a different autonomic makeup, right? I crave the stupidest shit. I crave broccoli. I crave beetroot, wholemeal bread, I like Ezekiel bread, I prefer to normal bread. All these foods he cannot stand. Mango, he's never been a fan of mango. Dried mango, yes, because everyone is. All of these foods, pawpaw, he can't be in the same room as it. It smells too bad for him. All of these foods are powerful sympathetic upregulators, and these were the foods. Those are the foods that I missed. Hummus, chickpea, when I was doing low carb. It turns out, and this is terrifying, those are the foods that some part of my system was craving because it was trying to upregulate my parasympathetic. So literally 2 or 3 days on this regime, and I feel like I'm on heart medication. I was on heart medication for a week or so after hospital. Beta blockers, right? If you've ever been on beta blockers, you just chill. You're just like, ah. And I feel like that most of the time now, which it turns out is what being autonomically regulated is like. And all of a sudden, like, I can sleep. And if you have that dysregulation towards the sympathetic, the slings and arrows, right? The little upset, someone cuts you off in traffic, something's a little bit late, your computer needs to restart, just normal life stuff. If you're constantly at a 6 out of 10, you get a wobble and all of a sudden your body's responding at a 9, right? It shouldn't. Like, I couldn't understand like why I would get to a 9 when I would see James having a similar challenge get to a 3. And it's like, because he's autonomically regulated and I'm not. Now, little things happen and I'm like, oh, okay, God, this is what it's like. This is my health story for you in 2023. When you set an intention, okay, pursue root causes. My goal is autonomic regulation. You might end up in South America's second poorest country, having a 17-year-old girl damage the veins in your hand to put Paraguayan-made off-brand antibiotics into your bloodstream. And if that hadn't happened, you would not have found the correct way to address the root causes so that by the end of the year, you can declare your 12-month health journey a success. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how magic works. And it's why I'm going to do a video about things that look like failures. So that's my health journey for 2023. I give myself between 60 and 80% marks, and I will determine that based on, as the weather improves, what things look like for me by the end of the year. Adventures. Okay, this one's turned out long, but I'm pretty happy about that actually, because I'm hoping some of this is useful. If not, it's it's part of my journey. Thank you for watching. I think wizards should have adventures. Peter J. Carroll wrote that in one of his first books. It's something I'm paraphrasing, but it seems kind of dumb to do magic if you're not going to have a slightly interesting life, which I think is fair. I think we're all in adventure mode now because the West is ending, right? But it has always been the thing that has organized my life. I remember when I was in film school, my best friend at the time, Owen, was also studying film, but at a different college. And we were very cool. It's weird. Like, this comes back to not drinking that much. We would just drive around all night. I'd be smoking. He now smokes, but he didn't then. We'd go via McDonald's and we would get a supersized, this is talk about health journey. I'd be smoking and drinking a supersized Diet Coke. And we just like drive around talking about films and things we'd want to make. And I remember saying, I just want to have adventures. This is the Graham Hancock Magical Egypt thing. I'd read Heaven's Mirror. I was studying film to do documentaries so that I could do things like that. And he says, I just want to write them. I don't want to have them. I want to do them. I'm like, no, that just seems dumb. Like, I want to have them. And so I get to go to Nunn Madol and all that, which I've done, right? So I think adventures are very important to me. That's kind of what my life is for, right? There's an Alex Hormozy thing when it comes to content creation, which is do cool shit and then talk about it. When he said that, I'm like, yes, that's what I do, or at least try. So this year I emceed my best friend's wedding in New Zealand with people that worked on The Hobbit, which was kind of fun. During that, I saw Peter Jackson's house during a cyclone. And when I say, like, he didn't invite me inside, I drove by his house because I am a creep. And I was in the area anyway. And I'm like, fuck it. And it was just really fun to know that it's kind of on this road coming out of Masterton, and like, you weren't supposed to be on the roads because it's a cyclone going on, but I'm that much of a creep that I drove past his house just so I know where it is. I don't know. It's just, well, it's lovely. You can't see much because he's very rich and it's very secure. But it's a nice part of the world. What else have I done? Oh, yeah. So Sikihor, gathering sacred herbs with native healers during Holy Week on a sacred mountain. Pretty happy with that. What else? Vanuatu, again, after a cyclone. This is a very cyclonic year for me. But hanging out in a clapped out casino with cyclone damage. So the thing about going to Vanuatu, this was book research, so is the Philippines. The last time a mob killed someone for witchcraft was 2015. So it doesn't sound like much of an adventure until you realize that there was a couple of places I went this year. Paraguay was one of them, and Vanuatu was the other, where in the West, we think of magic as something that we should perform and express. Like I remember and we all went through it, like some of us are still in it, goth teenage phase, where I'd bought myself a little Church of Satan pendant, and I would wear all black, which was absurd in Newcastle, Australia, because it's quite a warm climate. And you can't wear that well, it's hot in Vanuatu, but you don't wear it in Paraguay either. I saw one goth, one awkward goth teen, bless him, when I was there, because you don't even, like, it's serious business. It's the most Catholic country in South America. You can still fall foul of a mob, and the same thing happens in Vanuatu. So it was interesting adventures to navigate Vanuatu. The island that's most famous for sorcerers is Ambrin. And so talking to people from Ambrin in Port Vila, which is the capital, and trying to arrange secret meetings because there were some Ambrin chiefs in the area, and they were gonna, like, they're scared sharing this information. Well, scared's the wrong word. They are understandably reticent because of the risks in sharing it. So, like, it was the first time I've been on a bunch of these adventures. It was the first time I'm like, this is serious business. It's going to be in the book. This is serious business for much of the world. And I developed this graph in my head where in cultures that think magic isn't real, you have to overperform your allegiance to it. So the reason you can toddle around Newcastle, Australia in the late 90s and early noughties dressed in a very budget-friendly goth outfit is because no one thinks that shit is real. No one thinks, like, I mean, Church of Satan doesn't think Satan's real either, but like, no one thinks you're doing anything cosmically or interpersonally harmful. They probably wouldn't let you babysit their kids or whatever. They might be thinking that kind of stuff. But everywhere else, places like Vanuatu and Paraguay, for better and for worse, know that this stuff is real. So that we might, I was actually talking to someone in Paraguay about this, whose aunt can do things. So we come back to Lean Morgan's idea of the deed without a name. You would never call her a witch. You would never call this guy's aunt a witch. We might, like in the West, he was like, I'm a bit witchy. Like, I'm a witch. I can do these things. You'd never say that in Paraguay because that doesn't that doesn't end well. So it's been an interesting adventure experience this year that's going to be in that final book eventually, of there are places in the world that weren't stupid enough to think that magic isn't real, that changes the pH of how we express it, so that the further you move into cultures that retain the idea that magic is real, the less you can dress like a goth teen. So that's what I mean by there's this graph of crossing over where you actually still need to hide it in some places and perform it in other places to essentially like even it out to somewhere in the middle. Anyway, it's not a real graph. It was just an idea that occurred to me as we drove past this one, like, Asuncion's one goth teen. Dived on the USS Coolidge, which as a wreck I've always wanted to see in the Pacific. So that basically ticks off the wrecks that I wanted to dive on in the Pacific from my bucket list, because that was the last one. That was fucking cool too, by the way. And this one in New Zealand, Matafero Lloyd took me to, and I'm very privileged to have the friends that I do, to his ancestral burial caves. And I was the first white boy and the first non-family to go there. And that was a really powerful experience and a really obviously, but like a really sacred, wonderful spot. So when I list the do cool shit and then talk about it, I'm not going to talk about that's gross. I mean, I'm telling you about it, but I'm not going to go into salacious details. But it falls under my audit of what adventures have you done or had this year, right? And Paraguay. Paraguay had therefore book research that turned into a bunch of other adventures around it, but also some pretty good friendships. So, and now we have this affection for this weird fucking place. Like I was talking to a guy, this microphone I actually bought in Paraguay to do a Magical Egypt conference. And I was talking to the guy in the store and he's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I really like it here. He's like, really? I hate it here. Anyone under 25 like hates it in Paraguay and is looking to go elsewhere. And I get it, right? Like I got to see it as a tourist. I had more money. So Latin America is a wonderful place to be if you are Latin American wealthy. If you're a shop boy in Asuncion, life would be different, obviously, right? Anyway, it's so weird because he said, what's the worst country you've ever been to? And I had to think about it because I'm like, oh shit, is it Paraguay? Like, I loved it. Like, is it Paraguay? It's not. The answer is New Guinea. But like, after that, it's Paraguay. Because he was saying, I was saying to him, no, I really like it here. Obviously, nowhere's perfect, but I love its oddness. I love the strangeness of this island in the middle of a continent mentality, this weird place. You know, they had a dictator that banned marriage between people of the same race, like all this weird crap. It's like a Futurama country. But it was like, I'm glad I've actually been to New Guinea, so I could say, oh yeah, the worst place in the world that I've been to is New Guinea. But after that, it's Paraguay because I loved it. But I was a bunch of people. I was the first Australian that ever met in the place we stayed. One of the people I was talking to in Villarica, which is not the capital, it's just a regional city. First Australian they'd ever seen, like in the town. Now, the thing about Australians is we're like the crabs or other venereal diseases. We're everywhere and no one is particularly happy to see us. It's like you know, you can be at a beach bar in Jamaica and the chick behind the bar will be Australian. It's like, of course. But in Paraguay, you're like exotic. They ask if you're American and then they ask if you're German. And you say no and no, and like, Australiano. They're like, oh, and you start to feel, I am exotic. You know, you're not. But that was really that's really fun to be treated like, oh, Australian, wow. It's like no one ever says that. In Paraguay, they do. So Australians watching this, if you would like to be treated like an elf, a mysterious exotic elf, Paraguay's for you. Magic. Okay, so in terms of category areas, the one that I spent the most time with this year is manifestation. And in fact, when I was filming the videos for the manifestation part of the foundations, it occurred to me that some of the manifestation goals that I set at the beginning of the year, 2/3 of them had come off and it was already a third of the way through the year. So this, and God bless Chaos Magic's invitation to do unpopular things. Because when I say manifestation, I really do mean those white girl books that you see in the tables at the front of remainder bookstores that are called things like Manifest. Like I really do mean that. that was a key magical goal, in addition to like the Eliphas Levi prayer and elemental spirits. But more on that in a minute. And that's gone really well. And as I get to the end of 2023, I don't know if it's going to be full marks for manifestation, but it'll be close, particularly if you invite the reframe of one of the goals that I thought I wanted at the beginning of the year has actually transformed into something better that is a better match for my more longer term goals. And I think that's really the key of manifestation, is that it's this living internal document. That's good. I recommend it. And if you're new to it, foundations, go and join and do that. I got to participate in some Kimbanda ceremonies in Paraguay. That was fun. So I had some long and interesting discussions with Eshu Caveira about the role of the Kimbanda spirits in the cosmos and why it is they interact with humans, which Jake Stratton Kent would have loved. I wished I could tell him about it. it'll be in the book, and I will mention that I wish I could tell Jake about it. But I had some really interesting discussions, which were new for me. So I'd never done Kimbanda ceremonies on, I guess, indigenous soil. I mean, it's Paraguay rather than Brazil, but it counts. Had some really cool discussions about, which will also be in the book, about the role of Kimbanda in a Asuncion context, not with the members and their house, but with other people I met, which again, Jake would have fucking loved. So there's one house, talking to a gay guy in Asuncion, who said his entire house is gay or lesbian. Because I asked, like, what's the draw if you're Paraguayan to this cult? Super interesting that it has, and there was something Eshu Caveira said about wouldn't use terms like this, but like marginal communities and the othered, which is still very alive for me and will be in the book. New helping spirits, one of the main ones. So another benefit of having a serious health crisis that involved antibiotics in South America is hallucinating Jesus, and Jesus in like a healing capacity, which was good because there was like one of the nights when I was on my own before I checked myself into hospital, honestly, things might have a little bit touch and go. And so I could say Jesus saves literally in that context. And we had a long discussion or interaction about how that works. And Jesus in that healing capacity was a final explicit component of the helping spirits I use with clients. There's a few other ones which will come up later. And the reframe. So this is beside manifestation, a thing that makes manifestation work better, but is also its own powerful form of magic, which is kind of what we're doing here. That Marcus Aurelius, see everything as a gift from the gods. Like, there's a whole bunch about reframing in the Foundations course, because I'm not sure you're doing the most effective magic if you're not reframing. And that's just how it is. That's been my experience the last couple of years. And it will be one of the last ones I give up, right? But on that note, one of the things I am thinking about, which I'd like your thoughts on, is I want to see if I'm sitting with this idea of doing one sigil a day for a whole year. Like, when we come to the reframe, there's some stuff that I'm taking from 2023, manifestation and reframing. So what can I do to activate and improve and develop those two things that have been really powerful for me this year? And I think at the moment, until I can think of something better, it's going to be one sigil a day for a whole year. So 365 sigils. Let me know what you think. And if we're interested, we'll probably start a room on the Ansible or something where we can pursue that project. But there's a whole bunch of benefit to doing that. Obviously, you might get a bunch of magical results, but also you'll get really good at a tight opening, closing, activation. And I think that's where my head is at, because there's in the prayer course that I've been planning out, obviously, there's a section on like lengthy versus short prayers, how many memorize, the prayers that you should have in your mental toolkit at all times. And I think a sigil a day is a really good side effect of doing a sigil a day is to really tighten up off the cuff memorized invocations and activations, right? So yeah, let me know what you think, or if that vibes for you as well, because in order to achieve it, you're going to have to get the whole process down to under 5 minutes realistically, because over the course of a year, like things like my uncle died this year, like I was in hospital, there are days where you're not going to want to do it, and you're definitely not going to want to get into your fruity robes and light candles and wear your homemade Egyptian hat and all the rest of it. You're just going to want it to be tight. So yeah, that might be my magical goal for 2024. Like I said, too superstitious to set those intentions yet, but I'm dropping it here as where my thoughts are heading as I reframing and manifestation, and look for the benefits and how I want to develop them for next year. We get to books and media, and we return to let me say this. It was a good year for TV. because Fall of the House of Usher was fucking great. If you didn't watch that during spooky season, Foundation was one of the best shows I've seen in my life, and series 2 came out this year. I wrote a whole blog post about it. When I was sharing it with my friends, and they're like, "Why should I watch this?" And I'm like, "Well, because it's like a sci-fi about Martin Armstrong, basically." It's not, but I loved it, and it was one of those weird things, like Game of Thrones was when it came out, that was so gratifying to see explored what is in your psyche, which is you actually can predict certain things about how the cosmos is going, and to which I've, if you're watching this, you're aware that I'm batting a pretty good game for the 2020s when it comes to that. And so it's really gratifying to see a sci-fi exploring the role of prediction and fate and so on. Anyway, loved it. Favorite show of the year. If you are interested in stupid TV, which is to say like British sketch comedy humor, Catherine Tate had a show that that came out this year called Queen of Australia. And it's so stupid. If you like Catherine Tate, if you like her sketch shows, you will love it. But she essentially plays a misbehaving minor royal in London who is, because of her misbehaviors, owing to a quirk in the constitutional system of Australia, she's sent out here to operate as queen. So you'll have this like hard drinking, misbehaving royal as Queen of Australia in a country she hates. Really good premise, right? And it's funny if you find Catherine Tate funny. We found it funny. So if you have to, like, a stupid show, and it is stupid, Queen of Australia. We saw Tim Dillon live. That was basically the best of the live shows. It's funny when you do magic. Like, so for instance, there was lots of singing and performance in the Kimbanda ceremonies. Like, does that count as seeing a live performance? Can you hear the rain? Welcome to summer in Tasmania. Book-wise, I finally read Cloud Atlas this year. So that didn't come out this year, but I finally read it. And that was the best book I read this year. Dive deeper into the Middle Earth Legendarium, Fall of Gondolin, and so on. But the best book, and I don't know why, it took me almost 20 years to read the book of my favorite ever film, but it did, and I read it. I read it in Vanuatu because I just needed a novel for a beach, and I did, and that was my book. So that was the book of the that was books and media for this year. And honestly, I almost want to put DNR in the, as in did not run, in the film category, because the best I've got is Sound of Freedom. Like, I can think of maybe some documentaries I watched online that were good, but that was it. That was the, and it's not bad, but it's not even like, oh, you must go and see Sound of Freedom. That was it. That was books and media. Kind of a disappointing year in filmland. Music-wise, Seven Psalms was this experimental thing that Paul Simon released a couple of months ago, and it's this one track, weird, oddly religious, but good, like Paul Simon religious, brief little album, Seven Psalms. Look it up. That's worth listening to. Other than that, gay and Australian, I'm obviously going to say Kylie Tension, but the real answer, like the Rune Soup answer, is Paul Simon had a religious, it's a weird way of saying it, spiritual concept album called Seven Psalms, which you can just listen to on Spotify, and I quite enjoyed that in terms of new music. Yeah, film, absolute failure this year. Raining in the Coromandel, yeah, that doesn't surprise me. All right. So those are the category areas, and hopefully they have. No, I need to do a reframe around books and media. Reframe around books and media is, films were bad this year, but I also, if I'm honest, didn't seek them out. James doesn't like watching them as much as he likes binging on TV shows. I did a film degree. Of a Friday or a Saturday evening, I would generally prefer to watch films. And on the one hand, look at the Marvels. Like, on the one hand, the film industry is collapsing. But on the other hand, there's a century of really good films, many of which I have not seen. So in terms of a reframe of how bad films are, I can kind of lovingly turn that on myself, which will become a goal or a statement for 2023 of like, Okay, I've got TV down pat. I read a bunch of books because I have to do that for my job. Music, I'm reasonably happy with my capacity to discover new music. That I used to work in music media and so on. I still have music media friends, so I can ask cool people what I should be listening to. So I'm all right on that front. I failed film. It might have failed me this year, but I failed film, and so I won't. And again, not making goals or intentions for next year yet, but I will sit with my complicity in my terrible year of film and begin the process of going, okay, well, what does that look like for next year? Is it movie night every Friday? Because we're sad enough to not really go places. No, but it might be in the same way, because I do more than one book a week anyway. It might be that I watch one film a week, because I guarantee you I went months without seeing a film this year because they're all shit, right? It'll probably be something like that. I will probably commit to I'm going to do one film a week just because film is a powerful art form. I don't know. I don't know how to finish that sentence. I did a film degree. I should probably watch films. That's how it is. Right. So those are the category areas. To finish up before we move into the Q&A, I want you to look at what you've achieved and what you are continuing, what you are transforming, what you are continuing. So when I look at the magic, the obviously I'm going to keep, we'll do manifestation targets in January, all that kind of stuff. But that I would argue is developing into like a 1 sigil a day experiment. What I'm continuing is the body movement stuff and the whole food plant-based. So work out from the reframes what needs continuation, what needs evolution and development, and what is releasing. Like, what have you done? What are you done with? So in my case, I'm not done with autonomic regulation, obviously, but I'm deprioritizing it in the same way I'm deprioritizing my dental care because I found something that works. So look across the categories of what you are developing, what you are continuing, and what you are releasing. And don't make decisions yet. You have a month to let this process percolate, because this is what you want to do with desire, right? Like, to finish off this chapter or this part of the podcast of how it is you look back over 2023 at what you've done. You need to give yourself this month to, and you can set an intention around this, to drop the findings, if you will, into your heart center, into your guts, really into your second chakra, and give it a month and set the intention to allow that desire to sprout essentially into what it wants to be, what wants to come through you into 2024. And that's the key difference to the process. You're not sitting here going, you're not giving yourself like a pass mark and KPIs and setting them like, oh, I need 150 new OnlyFans subscribers by, because when I'm back on OnlyFans, 150 OnlyFans subscribers by April or whatever. Like, that's how capitalism dreams, is what Bayo Kamalafe would say there. What you want to spend this month, this holiday period, doing is reframing and inviting desire to see what needs to be released, what needs to be developed, and what needs to be continued. And with that, if you have listened all along to this as the solo show or audio version, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week with a guest show. It's a pretty good one. I'm just going to leave it as that surprise. And we have coming up which I wanted to have the date sorted, but getting astrologers to pick dates that are a combination of elections and also work for people's holiday schedules has meant that Austin and I have not firmed up the date for the Astro show, but that'll be sometime next month, obviously, and the final AI show. And there's a couple of other guests in and around there, and you can look forward to them. But that's it for the audio version of the show. Enjoy. See you next week. And there we go. We're going to jump to Q&As now, and that's right on 1:40. I can remember that. Somebody told me at the end, so I can tell the editor that's where we cut the audio. Now let me see if I can't just move my computer. Oh, did we just get a cat in the chat? What do you know? Never apologize for cats on keyboards, Elizabeth. Awesome. So I'm obviously out here in the rain without my multi-screen setup, so I haven't actually been following the chat. If you have questions, paste them in now. Otherwise, well, while you do that, I'm going to put the microphone down and make myself some more tea. I'll show you, actually. Hang on. Oh, this was a mistake because it's on a tripod. All right. I can't quite show you unless I move this around. Back it up. There we go. This thing is my samovar. Yeah, it's on too much of a tripod. It's not gonna get down there. All right, who's got questions? Yeah, it's not my OnlyFans. Good Lord. That's a recipe for making a very small amount of money. Oh, yeah. Release from nicotine for sure. So when we quit smoking, God, we used the Alan Carr method and I fucking loved it. When you begin the book, he says you're not only going to quit smoking easily, you're going to enjoy the process. And I remember reading that thinking, well, that doesn't sound like me, but he was right. And we were still heavy drinking at the time we quit smoking because I essentially promised God that if he saved my farm, which he did, I will quit smoking. You got to be careful with those ones, right? Anyway, the Alan Carr method worked amazingly for quitting smoking. Oh, shit. Good. Can you still hear me now? Oh, strange. All right. So the Alan Carr method is to answer your nicotine question. You will quit and you will enjoy it. And I also use that method at the beginning of the year to cut drinking down. So the Alan Carr method works for a whole bunch of stuff. But in terms of quitting smoking, Alan Carr, and not only will it work, like you literally enjoy it. I could not believe that was the case, but I enjoyed it to the point where I almost miss, not that I would ever smoke again, but like Can you hear me, or is it yeah, I don't know. Well, you can email questions, but I'm not sure if they will. I'm not sure if they'll work. So I've got this is just the laptop camera. For some reason, StreamYard's not actually picking up the Osmo Pocket. Let's try this. If it cuts out, it cuts out. I keep looking up the camera that's not working. That's cool. All right. So yeah, Alan Carr is the answer to your how you quit nicotine. And if you're interested in being able to cut down on booze as well, it's effectively the same process and the same method or system. And I used the audiobook for the how to curb your drinking, and I read the how to quit smoking Alan Carr easy way method. Change your life. I enjoyed seeing your overcast sky. Yes, thank you. Would Alan Carr's method work for exiting the Duma rabbit hole? No. You need magic and reframing and manifestation for that. And like in the sense that you have to, I mean, I know that's a joke question, but like in the sense that you have to find the medicine in the Duma rabbit hole. That's the point of apocalypses. I'll have more to say about that in the episode with Austin, of course, but like, yeah, you're not supposed to heal the Duma rabbit hole. You're supposed to go through it. Speaking of OnlyFans, yeah. Have I ever engaged any of Robert Moreau's hemisync stuff? Yeah, kind of. We talk about binaural beats in the journeying course, and I've used them. I've never felt the need for them. I have like a natural. It sounds like it's a flex. It's not. Most people who do magic are like this. I haven't felt the uplift of using binaural beats as opposed to just using drumming or what have you. Other people swear by it, and so it's in the journeying course as like, here are binaural beats. You might get something out of them. Enjoy. But I haven't had much of a need for them. How would you deal with the mental overlay Lynn Buchanan said he put into his classes? From what he says, he makes it sound like his overlay becomes part of the target, almost like re-exposure each time. I wouldn't. So let me say it this way. When we did the Greek magical papyri course, that was probably the first time ever in the history of that document that so many magical practitioners were working on it at the same time, because it was a jobbing document, or was a document for a jobbing magician in Thebes in the 300s. And over the course of unpacking that, I ended up encountering some curses that had been laid on this guy for unsuccessful magical healing attempts. So I ended up getting like weirdly sick and accidentally cursed because those things were in the document, associated with this dead magician whose diary we were reading and fucking around with, basically. So if you're my point of saying this is, if you're going to use Lynn Buchanan's system, you get all of it. You get his overlays. I know some of the premium members who have been doing the CRV have some concerns about the overlays and the intentions and the goals and so on that he's set around his teachings, but that just, it's his teachings and they are what they are, and that's what happens when you do magic, right? That's just like it is. Yeah, potentially the different, but I see, Jewel, I just think that's us, right? Like, I know there are people who absolutely really respond to binaural beats, so I would never dismiss it. And I think everyone, they owe it to themselves to look at the various Monroe methods, because you might get something out of them. Like, speaking of remote viewing, a lot of people absolutely thrive with that method. Yeah. All right, put a coin in the Starlink meter. See, everyone's blaming Elon for this, but it's StreamYard. It's always StreamYard. Well, not always. It'll be Elon at some stage, but at the moment it's StreamYard that's fucking with me. Yeah. All right. Bit disappointing because, yeah, I love my new little camera. It's saying the webcam's connected too. Anyway. Well, like, I've been talking for almost 2 hours, so if you don't have questions. Oh, yeah. So the Sam Altman thing, that'll be in the final AI episode. But the short answer is, like, literally cultists. This. So you want to read the Pirate Wires article about it, because this effective altruism, white savior, lunatic board thinking that they're saving humanity from what is essentially a web browser. Like, that's what ChatGPT is at the moment. It's a search engine essentially. I think it's an accumulation of that idiocy, but in a way that's potentially good, right? Because it's shaken it off the board. Now, is there the possibility that some even deeper skullduggery has gone on, because now we've got Larry Summers on the new board of AI as we head into the year where we will see a digital currency rollout? Yes, there is always the possibility that there's further skullduggery on board, but as far as I can tell, it seems to be the systemic incompetence of deluded people who think that ChatGPT is an existential threat to humanity, not Bibi Netanyahu, a fucking search engine, right? So it's more Silicon Valley nonsense thinking that they're, dare I say, they're more important than they are. Now, they're important and systemically important to how Western civilization runs, but they honestly think they're saving humanity from the thing that they're building themselves. It's so stupid. It's just so stupid. All right. What do you think to the notion that magic is metaphor? Well, I write about it extensively in Animistic. I think it's made it out of Tyson Yunkaporter and Into the Magical World largely because of me. So I think it's correct. Or I wouldn't be promulgating it. But welcome aboard. Yeah, welcome aboard. What are your thoughts on the alchemical medicines like the metallic oils for health? Such a good question, because all right, so Magical Egypt coming out this. Let me see if I can. I'm sick of having that on my lap. Just give me a minute. Look, you could see the offending fucking camera there. All right, this is easier. My hair is getting wet, but other than that. So one of the things I put together but didn't end up filming for Magical Egypt, which was supposed to come out in 2021, was a Hermetic manifestation course. So I now have that in the chamber, so to speak, and I'm not sure what to do with it, because I need to film it, so it's not just simply a matter of bringing it out. But I want to film it because it's quite good, and maybe I do it as like a free course or something. But I reference back to the point where I don't have the time to even write my own book, so it's all well and good to say, "Oh, I have this course. I'll put that out as a free course." It's like, yeah, when? All right. Anyway, the thing about Hermeticism and why it's called Hermetic manifestation is people, and alchemy has this problem. What is alchemy? Is alchemy a process of misdescribing elements and turning one of them into the other? It's like, well, no, that's a metaphor. Okay, cool. So what is it a metaphor for? Well, it's for the transmutation of more than human relations towards the extension of our health and lifespan, amongst other things. Okay, so if that's what alchemy is, then what alchemy isn't fucking around with mercury and sulfur and gold, right? Those are metaphors for an underlying process. So then alchemy becomes some of the more useful parts of biohacking. Alchemy becomes looking at your supplement stack and moving it towards a more natural direction because they work better, right? So when you ask, like, what are your thoughts on alchemical medicines, blah, 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 for health, I have very little interest in the metaphors of alchemy. I have tried for 20 years to get interested in cooking up fucking sulfur and mercury and pretending that you're like titrating gold and all this crap, and then realizing, oh, but actually it's a metaphor. It's like, this is boring and it's a dumb metaphor. Like, I can't get my way in. I've read it all. I know it all. It's a weird way of saying it. I find the metaphors that alchemy operates on boring and uninvitational. But if they are quote unquote just metaphors, and alchemy is indeed the process of extending your health span and your lifespan via optimizing more than human relations, and I'm very into alchemy. But to answer your question, what do I think about alchemical oils for health? I think, or alchemical medicines, I think any medicine that works is definitionally alchemical. But alchemical medicines, so oil of gold, oil of antimony, not for me. I have tried, right? I think, so if you've done the foundations course, you know that there's like a Paracelsian line in magic, which we in the West don't explore much, and that has Goethe on it, that has Steiner on it, and so on. But it also has homeopathy on it. So first of all, I think homeopathy is Europe's indigenous energy medicine. And second of all, I think it's what alchemy became to become useful, right? To become useful in a health context. The alchemy, it's just the symbol set has never appealed to me. Never. And I try, right? Like, yeah. I've got like Brian Cottonworth's books, and they're excellent. Like, so if you want books on alchemy, and I'll probably get him on the show early next year, because it's not that I dislike alchemy, it's that I can't, the symbol set's so dumb. Like, I can't do it. It's just, I'm not interested in like, oh, well, like your body is like a mix of, well, the cosmos is about balancing the sulfuric and the mercurial. And it's like, oh, sulfur stinks and mercury kills you. It's like, yeah, sorry. So thanks for the question to allow me to rant on like not what's wrong with alchemy, but my problem with the symbol set. Where are you with Alison McDowell's research thought these days? I noped out of Alison fairly shortly after having her on the show because she got weird about Greg Carlwood, and she fell in with like a dodgy crowd, and it's like, the reason is she is new to conspiracy land. Like, when she was on the show during the scamdemic, she basically said that. She's like, listen, I'm just like a mum from Philly who was trying to improve her kid's school and found this like wild this wild project behind it, which is true. But she was new to conspiracy world, so she had the unfortunate possibility of having to step into conspiracy world and make all the mistakes that the rest of us make initially, but doing it at a time when it was urgent. So she's a little bit off the reservation. I still really like her as a person, and we're actually aligned about a bunch of stuff, like the permaculture stuff and indigenous wisdom and all that. But yeah, I've noped out of Alison just because she ran with a crowd that I wasn't in alignment with. Skinner made a comment recently about the impact of the Grimoire Renaissance. What are your thoughts on the butterfly effect of hundreds of thousands of people contacting spirits and angels? Well, I've spoken to said spirits and angels about it, and particularly when it comes to the membership and some of its patrons, like St. Cyprian, that was part of the deal. That I will put his name on the mouths and lips of every practitioner in the West, and he will treat us especially. I talk about that for people who join the membership. Like, you are stepping into a field and a collection of agreements that I'm doing my best to manage. But there's a chapter kind of about that in the book that I was supposed to write in Paraguay. So there you go. Can the Alan Carr method work for cannabis? Probably. Go to the Easy Way website. He's got ones for like smoking, drinking, weight loss, and what have you. So there's probably ones in there for cannabis as well, because it's the same. It's the reframe. You look at what you look at and heal the psychology underneath it, right? Like, so it's somewhere in between hypnosis and NLP. There's, as the Simpsons says, there's no trick to it. It's just a stupid trick, but it's powerful, and you take it seriously and it will work. Yes. Just wondering, because there are several alchemical schools here in the USA, and some of the old members sell the metallic oils. It's just I like my symbol set to be more jungly. I always have, right? I've never been, or I would have joined maybe something like the Golden Dawn. The 17th century high alchemical symbol set, I find beauty in it in a way, but it's just never spoken to me. It just hasn't. Like, that's just what it is. It's not a judgment on it in any way. It's just that it's not how it's not what sings to my psyche, I suppose. The metaphors for alchemy do suck. Yeah, they do. It's just sulfur and mercury. Like, really? These things are deadly. If we're talking about spells being metaphors, it's like, well, can't we find something a little bit? This is why I use words like medicine and fruit of the tree of life, whole food, plant-based. What is that crazy camera? It's so wild with all this crazy. Oh, it's my beautiful DJI Osmo Pocket. I love it. And that's with the active track on, which I absolutely love. I find it. So this is coming back to things that my psyche works for and doesn't. However my neurodivergence plays out, there are things that I find oddly relaxing, which you know about, Jay, actually. One of them is first-person camera of driving footage or just people walking around cityscapes. So when we were trapped in this country for 2 years, and this turned out to be psychologically unhealthy, but I would watch videos of people just walking around Lima, Peru, just like with their little GoPro or their phone, just in front of them walking along. And Lima's not a pretty city. It's not like, oh, Barcelona or something. No, Lima's quite ugly. And I love it. I find it relaxing. In the same way, there is something about the active track on the DJI Osmo 3 that I just find relaxing. So yeah, that's what I'm using. What do you think of the Robin Wall Kimmerer braiding sweetgrass? Love it. Again, she's quoted in Ani.Mystic. I think braiding sweetgrass is the best. I didn't love the moss book. Braiding sweetgrass is seminal. It's a cornerstone in the return to. No, let me reposition that. The opening back up of total island knowledge systems to the settler minds, and it's the beginning. Well, no, it's a seminal or cornerstone or pivot point in that multi-century process. But braiding sweetgrass is fantastic. Yeah. I like videos of 5-star hotel buffets. See, that's interesting. Yeah, you're vegan. That's weird. Repeating my question from earlier, which edition of Cloud Atlas did you read? The US or the UK one? The UK one. I must have been. I bought it. I bought it in London when I first got to London in like 2008. Like, oh yeah, I should read this one day. Alchemy. Yes, like chemistry. It's all from of Egypt. See, that's what I mean. At the top level, the alchemical metaphor is correct, which is why I began my story of what I don't resonate with the story of Hermeticism and Hermetic manifestation, because at its top level, Hermeticism and alchemy is a Egyptian-derived story of the metaphoric relational nature of the cosmos. Because think about what it is. It is the combination of things to complete creation one way or the other, to return to health. That's what Hermeticism is us completing creation with the creator, right? So in alchemy, that's all there. It's just that you think, oh, cool, I'm on board with that. Then you open up the book and it's like fucking sulfur and, oh, you need to cook this down for a few days. And even though you're doing that, it's just a metaphor. And I'm like, this is a dumb metaphor. This is like year 7, which is early high school for me, year 7 science with fucking Bunsen burners and shit, when I could be out in the jungle, pooping in a hole, talking to a snake. Yeah. Alchemy is the name of a process. Elements can be anything. Yes, I like that. Exactly. Because the universe is processional, right? Like, it's forming, it's not formed. Putting the mic down for a sec while one of you types a question. back. See, this one, I don't want to tip it up because you can kind of see that it's metal there. So this is insulated and it's shaped like a horn, right? And that's a guampa in one of the indigenous languages of Paraguay. So it was originally made out of a horn. So you buy them horn shaped, and that's how you know you're getting Paraguayan ones for tereré. As a chemist, I would also rather be in the woods pooping in a hole. Excellent. See, I think it's the superior form of alchemy. But see, chemist, I immediately go to the McKenna brothers at that point, because you're still doing sacred chemistry when you're out there, and it's not just the so-called active ingredient in ayahuasca when you're doing that. You are in a glorious biochemical assembly, which in this case would be the Amazon. So yes, you're my kind of chemist then. Are you a fan of the Schlusser cell salts? Yes. As well, not the 12 zodiac salts so much as see, this is a good example of why I think homeopathy is what alchemy usefully evolved into down the Paracelsian line to be Europe's energy medicine system and available to more people as healing. So I had another call with one of Dr. Cowan's Eduardo, I forget his name. This is like a hot Ecuadorian doctor that works for Thomas Cowan and Thomas Cowan's clinic. So I had a telemedicine call with him at the end of my heart healing journey, because I used Strophanthus and all the rest of it, like the Tom Cowan approach, essentially. And I said, like, I'm on the things that are useful when you have an acute health crisis in the heart area, but I'm past that. What should I go on to support the overall journey? And he put me on a bunch of these different salts. So I'm a big fan of the salts, but I haven't tried the zodiacal ones. They have an entanglement with the start of homeopathy. Yes, they do. Yeah, exactly. Did you catch Mark Stavish open letter to the children of Hermes? I did not. I did not. You can drop that in the chat for other people, because there'll be people watching on the replay who might be interested in hearing that or reading that. I mean, it's not really hearing, is it? Sorry to make you do work, Matt, but hey, you brought it up. Oh, Jay, speaking of you being vegan or whatever, I mentioned the whole food plant-based. So we'll have some fun discussions about that next year. Yeah. What's the best gear you've brought this year? Do you mean drugs? We're on YouTube. It's the Osmo Pocket 3. I love it. I have been waiting. I mean, having just said that, it was actually StreamYard, because the camera is still connected. It's still even saying webcam and whatever. It's still following me around. So it isn't the camera, it's StreamYard, which is shit that fucked this up. But I have been waiting since film school for the promise that this camera is, okay? It's on a gimbal and it's a 1-inch sensor. And for like just walking vlogging, that's all I've been after. This is it. That's the best gear I've bought this year. Unless you mean drugs, because we've had I'm going to do a video on how I make kava. So I didn't include that in the health healing or the healing section, but the plant allies that have been available to support the autonomic regulation have been very powerful this year. And I've actually got a bunch of clients that are on a kava journey of their own, because we do a lot of autonomic regulation work in the shamanic healing sessions, and kava is really good for that. And I did, one of the other reasons I went to Vanuatu was to deep dive a bit on how they do it, because that's where it's from. And so I'm in a position to share how to make kava so that it's good for autonomic regulation, anxiety, stress, and so on. But thank you for letting me respond drugs when you meant tech. But the answer is this, 1,000,000%. The answer is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. Affiliate link in the chat. There isn't, but I love it. I love it. And it's there's no point, like, it's not, obviously I have the FX30 to do once I've set up in here. I've got my studio A cam, all of that kind of stuff. If you want to do vlogs or whatever, if you like this stuff, it's everything I've ever wanted in a camera. And I mean that. Like, I remember talking about what I wanted in a digital camera. Amazing as I'm still only 27, when I was in university in 2002. And it's basically it's basically this. What fire are you going to carry over these mountains is 100% bang on. Thank you. Thank you. Because, yeah, there will be more about that. There'll be more about that in the geopolitics discussion, and as we move the energetics and magical work into January proper. It's the Osmo Pocket 3, Jewel. Yes, it is. It's the new one. What about the whole dictation thing, recording to my phone, then telling ChatGPT? I haven't. Okay, I'll try that, because we spoke about the dictation method, and I've tried a bunch of stuff. It still hasn't been good. Thank you for the suggestion of like using Google on a Google phone, Google Docs. It's still the best of it, but I still haven't got it to where I need it to be. So I'll give that a shot. That's not a bad idea. I thought, this is for people who are unaware, Jay and I had long discussions earlier this year about the best ways to turn voice to text into usable text, because I thought it was going to be a bigger part of writing the final book in the Dot trilogy than it was. Mostly it's because for the Dot trilogy book, my mind doesn't work that way. It's more because it's a Scarlet Imprint book, which means it's fancy. And because it's fancy, it means even if I don't footnote stuff because I'm racist against footnotes, it still has to have that academic rigor and less of the stream of consciousness. Now, the book that I will do after my Scarlet Imprint book is essentially my shamanism book, right? Like, it's about the heart healing journey, but consequently it's about shamanism. That one is going to be a fucking wild and woolly stream of consciousness, as you like. So I will revisit how to do voice to text so that I could like turn a book around in a fucking 10 days. Funny you mentioned that, and the carrying fire over the mountains. So the Armstrong conference was on the weekend last week. What the hell day is it? Saturday here. Was last weekend. So I've watched the replays of his forecast conference, and so I've been sitting with what happens. Again, this will all be in the geopolitics presentation, and to some extent the Astro show with Austin. I've been sitting with what I will do in, let's say, 2026, 2027, if we lose the internet for a couple of years, which is a non-zero possibility. I put it at about 55% possible that during the escalation of the war with China in particular and Russia, the West gets EMP'd. Either that or we false flag EMP. But the point is, it seems more likely than not that EMPs are involved in the story of this decade somewhere in there. So we'll be without the internet, which means I'll be without this for a couple of years. Let's say a year, 18 months. What will I do? I will write so many books. I'll be sitting here at the edge of the world, possibly in this very chair, writing books, and then we'll get the internet back, and the world will emerge from World War III's wasteland, and I'll be like, hey, have me on my show. Have me on your show to talk about my shamanism book. That's the fire I'm carrying over the mountain, right? So one of the things you'll see, because I will do a video tour of actually, because I'm not plugged into that, is this going to work? This is going to... I'm back. So the single bedroom is now my office. Fuck you, StreamYard. Thank you, Jay, but it's good. It is now my library, and the master bedroom is now what will be the where I film and where my desk is and so on. So I won't have the bookshelves behind me because I'll actually have room. But I will have, for the first time in my life, it's a single bedroom in a demountable shack But I will, for the first time in my life, have a library. Like I will have a room that is just my books. And it's, by the way, that is a exhausting process of moving my thousands of books and bookshelves from the main house to here. But as we're doing it, I'm like, okay, if we lose the internet, by the time World War III rolls around, the risk of a draft in Australia will have passed me by, because even though I'm still 27, I will have aged out at the top of that. So I'm less concerned about being here for a draft personally, which means I'm just going to be stuck here without internet for a couple of years. And yeah, I don't like, if that happens, let me be clear about this. If that happens, billions of people will die, like 1.5 billion people, because it means the war has escalated to maximum World War III. So I'm not looking forward to it, but I am finding what is mine to do in that moment at the edge of the world. And it's almost like it's a natural extension of the autonomic journey, right? Because I'm very grateful for my job. I love it. Nothing has given me more joy and meaning than the podcast and the sharing of how I do magic amongst the membership. But it's a lot of work and it's stressful. And if I am prevented from doing it because there's no internet, I won't pretend there isn't a part of me that doesn't like the idea of sitting in this little shack, starting to fire, and just like writing a bunch of books. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's just something that you guys are mentioning in the chat. Also, speaking of EMPs, have you ever thought of creating a thumb drive version of all the courses? No. People ask for downloads and so on. I've struggled. It's $12 a month, and I still, up until I was forced this year, which I didn't want to mention in the review, but I'm still proud of it, to move from Vimeo. And it's a challenging thing to offer, right? Because it's not that expensive. It is 10% of the price of its nearest competitor, and it doesn't have a competitor like Nicki Minaj. And people would still pirate it. And not just that, the people who would, detractors, would leave in a huff, pirate the material, and then sell their shit versions of my course for $300. So no, and this is in conjunction with St. Cyprian, where I'm like, how do we want this to play out? There are different models. And he's like, no, it needs to be in the same way Pieces of Eight doesn't exist in physical form, except for one guy that I met at As Above in Portland, who had printed it out and like bound it so that there's like one physical copy of Pieces of Eight in the world, which this guy has made, and he got me to sign. So it's the first time I've ever signed it. The membership exists in the way it does, and the material exists at a digital field level. When we get an update on that, when that changes, you'll be the first to know. But at the moment, it is as non-physical as possible now. And we also have air-gapped hard drives that are in Faraday bags, so that if we get an EMP tomorrow, the material's still there. Do you think Seattle gets nuked? Interesting question. And I could be topical and say, would anyone be able to tell the difference at the moment? But to answer your question, yes. I think the Pacific Northwest, I think the coasts. Now, let me put it this way. When I look at the scenario plans for the middle of the decade, there's a number of ways that nukes come to American cities. And one of them is a false flag. And the other one is the Kinzhal missiles, right? If it's Kinzhal missiles, it will be San Diego, it will be cities in Texas, it will be Montana, it will be New York, and it will be Washington. Because it'll be places where there are military installations and bombs. If it's a nuke false flag, which I think is possible, when I say possible, one of the things that will happen next year as an escalation of the civil unrest model and collapse of the West is this further splintering of Western civilization along religious lines, and it's incredible, right? There is only one correct position to the genocide in Gaza, which is to oppose it completely and unilaterally and with no complication or caveat. That's just what it is. The thing that is fascinating is that means in order to do so, you end up in protest situations in Western cities with people who, in the case of Sydney, were shouting "Gas the Jews." Does that happen at every anti-war rally? No, it doesn't. But we are moving into a splintering of Western civilization for, like, this is a weird way of saying it, the right reasons. There's no getting out of this process. All we're left with is how you play is what you win. And as a result of that process, we get real and false flag terrorist incidents that escalate in ferocity. I think we end up with like a 9/11 style extreme event in an American city in Q1 of next year as part of this escalation process, because they need something like that to bring in digital IDs and to potentially go to an all digital, all postal, which is to say all stolen election next year. So when you say, do you think Seattle gets nuked? There's a bunch of ways that kind of death comes to Western cities that we're facing over the next couple of years. We are heading into, and I said this and now people are aware of it, but it'll be obvious next year, we're heading into the worst years of your life. That's just what they are. Between now and 2028 are the worst years of your life. That's what it is. And there's no pretending around that. So in addition to the Momentum Tunnel video that I shared this week, the other vlogs I'm going to do this year, and obviously more premium member content, is going to be about how we align and how we shift to the best available timelines, I guess is the way of saying that magically. But to answer your question, yeah, it could. There's a bunch of ways bombs come to Western cities in the coming years. Any thoughts on Jugan's promotion of Islam? I'm not surprised. I mean, some of the stuff he does now, I don't follow him that closely, but some of the stuff is for the gram, shall we say. But any enemy of the West, he's going to be in alignment with, but he's also, you know, a traditional culturalist, I suppose. And Islam is that. The thing is, Islam wins. We know that, right? Like, over the course of a century, in the same way Spain was Islamic for several centuries, the mutation of Christianity that we call post-Christian West, and this is why I've been trying to get more people to sit with Ivan Illich's thought, and why I had Dugald on the show and so on to talk about it. Just feel up the timeline to the 2100s. Islam, quote unquote, wins. So we're at that elvish moment of deciding what is ours to do and what and how we contribute to the survival of the things that we think is valuable. And that statement is not set up in opposition to Islam, because what, 40%, 60% of how we do astrological magic is Islamic. There's Sufism. There's nothing like, I would argue that an esoteric read, or no, a better way of saying that, Islam's contribution to Western European esotericism is in fact one of the fires I think we should carry over the mountain. But if you're just talking about how the world shakes out over the next couple of centuries, we're moving into that kind of pivot eventually, right? Like it sucks for a while, but yeah. I couldn't give up the US West Coast, but did decamp out of a major city at least. Fair enough. The street preachers have returned to our cities, but the messages are outdated. Yeah, I like that. That's absolutely true. I like that. Yeah. Well, and I'm very interested in that, and that's why I had Dugald on the show. I understand the resurgence of Christianity. I just wish a better Christianity was resurging, but that probably falls to us to be that. Like, even if we don't consider ourselves Christian, which is fine, like anyone who's doing any kind of Western magic is at least downstream from that in an Ivan Illich sense. And I understand the psychic, as in of the psyche, compulsion to find easy answers from a previous time. So you're correct. Yeah. Lots of beggars on our street corners. Yeah. Into the West stuff. I always was surprised by, even as a kid, the amount of beggars I would see in the US compared to Australia. And yeah, I mean, I was only there last year, and that was in Austin, and Austin doesn't have Skid Row style tent cities, but there are a lot of people on the streets. Mm. All right, I'm going to put the microphone down again to refill my tea. So behave, StreamYard. Oh shit. What's real and false in AI? What are your thoughts on the images being shared in the news and social media on the horrors going on? Okay, this is a can of worms. If you look at some of the photos of the damage after Hiroshima, some of them are fake. So there's a famous one of like the charcoal outline of a human on what is essentially like bamboo wood, like a bamboo wood woven wall. Now, wait a minute. So this nuclear blast vaporized a human body, bones and all, and left a cartoon style outline on a Japanese bamboo wall. When it comes to war, the fog of war is real in the sense that you will never know what's now. Does that mean Hiroshima wasn't bombed? Does that mean nuclear bombs don't exist? I'm not ready to go that. Obviously, Hiroshima was bombed. I'm not ready to go down the nuclear bombs don't exist route because that's one of those conspiracies where you've got a bunch of countries who would be keeping to that lie themselves when it would be in their best interest not to. I don't think nuclear bombs are as advertised because I don't think atomic theory is right. But that's not my point. The point is some of the pictures from Hiroshima are not just fake, but like moon landing fake, the kind of stuff that only young boomers would believe, that we look at now and realize this is like a cartoon. This is like Bugs Bunny, right? So where we are with the horrors of the world and the fake images and pictures and so on, they're just better at it, but it's always the same. And you have to navigate it with the same discernment, which is like, what am I looking at? Why am I looking at it? What can I learn from this? Because I knew this was going to get, even before the Gaza shit, I knew this was going to get really, really bad when the early Ukraine stuff, where actual Nazis were murdering Ukrainians and laying their bodies out in the street and pretending that the Russians had done it so that they could continue their genocide of ethnic Russians. And we're in the echo of some really bad times. But if you recall, all the stuff at the beginning of the Ukraine disaster was fake, completely fake. The fucking ghost planes, all of that stuff was fog of war fake. It's just in the intervening 15 months, we now have AI. And Israel in particular is a very technologically savvy country. Like a bunch of digital startups and what have you are there. So we just move into the kind of fog of war situation, the likes of which we have never experienced before, but the underlying shape is the same. Now, you just wait until we get Uranus in Gemini, which is timing for proper World War III. And holy shit, we're going to have, I hate this when people say, oh, the real World War III is the battle for your mind. Like this fifth generation. Well, no. The real World War III is the murder of innocent children going on in the Middle East and whatever. Like that's the real World War III. To say that we're in like, which isn't wrong, this fucking fifth generation warfare or the real World War III is the battle for your mind. It makes it about you. The real World War III is the state murder of children. But we will move into theaters of war that involve the imaginal, and it should be where people like us shine. And so I'm going to say it that way for when it comes to Uranus and Gemini. Also watching the slow takeover of government by Christian extremists. Yeah. So this is all in the Jungian model. We have an increase of extremism everywhere, of all different kinds, because it's polarization that is increasing, as we need that energy. When I say we need that energy is required to split and disintegrate the West, this Western construct. So yes, we are. Dr. Tom Cowan had an interesting take on nukes, was surprising. Yeah, yes, I've watched those webinars. He has. The streaming image of carnage currently reminds me of state television under Milosevic circa 1992. The result was mass desensitization to war crimes. I think this is one of the things where you have to guard your heart and understand why you're doing it. It's kind of why I wrote the post about, like, I don't know what to do with X anymore. I never went on it to look at dead babies, and I've seen dead babies now, and I've also seen fake dead babies, and it's like, what is the end of this process? Do I become desensitized to dead babies? Do I become so skilled? Do I become an expert in dead babies so that I'm like, that's a fake one though. That dead baby I just saw is fake. I know the difference between a fake and a real dead baby. Like, what reality am I stepping into with my media choices, which is to say my imaginal and my heart, where I become an expert in what is a real and a fake dead baby? And what am I doing on a platform that makes me an expert in that? But like, that's a real question, because the answer, I don't think the answer, maybe it is like, oh, just don't be on that platform then. That was the answer in the short term, but I don't know. So before we went live this morning for me, this evening for you, I was looking at the news, and X is now the most visited social media platform in the world again. So it's more than Instagram. It's obviously more than Facebook. And Elon is crowing about it, as I suppose he would. The dark part of that, because on the one hand, I think, oh, good, because I do, like, even with the dead babies, Jesus Christ, what a fucking year. I do prefer it to Instagram and Facebook. But here's the darkness behind the growth of X to be more popular than Instagram and Facebook at the moment. The traffic popularity over the last 3 months is because of the dead babies. It's because it is on X that all of this violence is being shared and shown. So it's all well and good for Elon to say, yay, everyone thought Threads was going to kill us, and everyone thought the platform was going to die once I took over. And so on the one hand, he's crowing, but on the other hand, it's like, yeah, mate, but you know why people have visited X over the last few months, right? It's because of dead babies. It's because of fucking bombed hospitals. Is this the open question? Because that stuff is happening. So, like, is that good? Is it good that X is the most popular social media platform because this is where you go to look at bombed hospitals? Is it? I don't yet have the answer, because what's the solution then? Like, oh, I won't use that platform. It's just got bombed hospitals and dead babies on it. It's like, yeah, but the babies are dying. I don't know what to do. Yes, I do know what to do. Nothing. Because what is ours to do with the fog of war and what is happening is not obvious now beyond being aware of it, right? Yeah. Just spitballing, do we need a non-state affiliated divination core to counter all the AI? So the short answer is yes, but they actually exist, right? So we do have little smaller groups that are performing that kind of remote viewing or divination function. And I do think there will be an aspect of that as the quarterly presentations, because I would argue that's one of the things I do with the quarterly geopolitical presentations. But I do think as it comes time, which is next year, to select from the like thread momentum tunnel timelines, the ones where you are minimally impacted by what the world has to do this decade, I think there's an invitation for more of that. So I've been thinking about like, do I pick a few astrologers and remote viewers and do like a round table at the end of the presentation? You know what I mean? Like I need to see how I fold that in. But the short answer is yes, and you can start one now. Speaking of the decline of the West, what do you think of Kingsley's Catafalque? So I bought it, I pre-ordered it, and I haven't got more than about 50 pages in. And if Jay's still in the chat, he'll appreciate this because we've had long discussions about it. On the one hand, I really like Peter Kingsley because I'm in almost full alignment with his, let's call it, Greek shamanism model. But I can't stand his writing. And I very specifically can't stand his writing because Story Waiting to Pierce You, which is my favorite Kingsley book, could actually be a blog post. He has this very performative lyrical way of writing where it's like a pseudo mystic approach, and more importantly, assuming that I know nothing, and hence he has to take this really basic pseudo mystic slow approach as if I'd never heard of ancient Greece before, as an example. And it's a mismatch, because let me tell you who reads Peter Kingsley books: philosophers, esotericists, people who are already interested in Parmenides, right? Like, and so I haven't finished it. I have it. It's funny you mentioned that, of all books, because as I was putting my Peter Kingsley books up in the shelf next to my Jung books and my mythology books, I'm like, if we lose the internet, I will finally get around, because I'll have the time to reading Catafalque, right? But Peter Kingsley is my favorite writer whose writing I don't enjoy. I think he's an important writer, and I struggle to read him. So I hope that for people who are listening, that answers that's where I'm at with Peter Kingsley. Does anti-Semitism rise in the occultism hermetic communities proportionally to university settings, general populace? I hope not. I hope not. I don't know. I don't. It would surprise me, but then I'm not really plugged into the corners of esotericism, Thelema, where that kind of stuff happens. So maybe. I hope not. Being offline has been deeply refreshing. It always is. I think the weird ritual that's created around the release of Oppenheimer and the Barbie movies had something to do with the desensitization to World War III. Might have. As I said earlier, I haven't actually watched them. So we will. Like, I think they're on streaming platforms now. We'll probably, if I'm going to watch one film a week next year, which again, I'm not making that a intention or a goal yet because it's not next year. But if I do, I will end up watching them, right? That's always the way with me. Like, I get to stuff before or after everyone else does, and then I want to talk about it, and everyone else is like, we moved on. We're all over here now. So I missed Foundation in last year when it came out, and only picked it up in the second season. I mean, I watched the first season this year, but only because the second season was coming out, and I'm like, oh shit. Has everyone else been watching this? Turns out none of you have, because it's on Apple and we pirated it, obviously. Fuck, I'm not made of airports. I can't pay for every streaming platform. But yeah, and there's a whole bunch of good shows on Apple that no one watches because it's on Apple. I'm going to repeat Lance's question. Is now a return of the prophets in capital letters? No, because they never went away. Yeah, they never went away. We just have to listen to them differently. I wrote, where the fuck did I do that? I did that in a solo show. Prophecy is about the hyperdimensional now rather than prediction. And it's about how we stray from how God wants us to run our kingdom, to make it simple. And you can pass that through whatever philosophy you want. So I don't think it's a return to prophets. I think it's a realization that prophecy is a perennial function describing a hyperdimensional now. The third temple will require the labor of demons. A working bee of evangelists will not suffice. So, shit. I think, yes, but I think, this is so complicated. I wonder if I want to go into it. So, Ivan Illich says in Rivers North of the Future that the story of the Good Samaritan changed reality, and Jesus' sharing of it changed reality, because what happened was this was the first time you could essentially care for people outside your tribal group. And there's more detail in the book. You can go into it because you think, oh, I don't know if that's right, but then you go into it and you see the case he makes, and it's his case, and he makes it quite well. What I've been sitting with reading that book now, after talking to Dougal on the show the other week, is the Good Samaritan is a Palestinian. Like, obviously, the book Rivers North of the Future is 20 years old now, but Illich refers to him as such. And so this is a Palestinian who is caring for someone who is a victim of violence in the area of Israel-Palestine now. And the reason he talks about this story changing reality is that we are in, and he's right about this, we're not in a post-Christian era, we're in a mutated version of Christianity, because from the Christian notion of that comes out of the story of the Good Samaritan, we get wokeism, we get white saviorism, we get the colonial project, the morality of the colonial project of like helping brown people be better. Like, we get all the shit that's happening. We get all kinds of interventionism, which is a mutation of a sacred message. And it's just interesting, but horrifying to sit with. Here we are in the wind up of this Christian heresy, which is the last 3 centuries of the European Enlightenment project, that includes Israel, the creation of Israel. And it's like an echo of a story of Palestinian kindness in the face of violence in an area that has got what's going on that's going on. And the people that are pushing it absolutely want to literally blow the dome off the rock and build the fucking temple, because like Nikki Haley, like, let me be real, she wants to fucking do that so Jeebus comes back. Like, when you're talking about like the third temple will require the labor of demons, they're here. They are here and they are fucking laboring. And I can't escape the feeling that the sacrifice will not just be the Palestinians to make, and that Israel itself is being set up for a sacrifice. I don't think Israel exists by the end of this decade. And so the Israelis, the warmongering Israelis who are there celebrating the genocide of these children, better be careful what they're celebrating, because they're fucking next in the play out of this project. And the reason I think that is just, one, it's a feeling, but two, Kissinger said like 4 years ago, Israel has become a geopolitical nightmare. When Kissinger rings the bell on the project, like, Israel fulfilled its use in the second half of the 20th century to be the colonial holding and military base of the Anglo-Americans during the petrodollar era, which ended decades ago, by the way. Everyone's like, oh, blah, blah, the petrodollar. Say, bitch, fucking the 1980s called, all right? Anyway, but that's a separate discussion. Israel was necessary for a regime or a way of organizing power in the world that is no longer in play. And so you have a confluence of expedient evils. So at a, let's call it Mr. Global level, it's all well, and like the escalation of violence in Palestine grows to incorporate Lebanon, Iran, all the rest of it, whose bombs land on Israel. the thing is, Israel wants that. Like Netanyahu wants that. When I say Israel wants that, I fucking mean Likud and Netanyahu, right? The Venn overlap between the neocons and Bibi's Likud party is a circle. But Bibi wants it because he wants to destroy Iran. And so far, the world has resisted his capacity to get us into that war. And this is his last throw of the dice, which suits Mr. Global, which is like, well, we don't really need Israel anymore, but we do need a fucking war in the Middle East that involves Russia and eventually China. So you have this, if you look down the demonic hierarchy from Mr. Global down, we unfortunately have a confluence of goals that includes, I don't care if Israel exists anymore, as long as the war escalates, to incorporate and fuck with Iran and then eventually Russia. So, and then the reason I'm mentioning all of this is that we are in a terrifying hyperdimensional play out of a esoteric read of the Bible, including the Good Samaritan, including Abraham's sacrifice, and of course, including Revelation. Because these things are archetypally ever present and real. That's how you know you have an archetype. And we'll get more into that next year. But seeing as you mentioned, like the temple's going to require more than builders, it's going to require demons. It will, and they're already here. And this is, guys, this will be the worst years of your life. Make sure, and that's one of the things. Maybe I'll mention it. Maybe I should have mentioned it in this episode. Look to your heart and be careful and and ensure that it is strong enough to get through this, because it's got some hearting to do over the next few years, and yeah. Foundation is some of the best TV in years. I've been loving it from the start. Thank you. Yeah. Apple has lots of great shows. They need to do a better job of promoting them. Yeah. Monarch. I just started watching that. That is actually quite good. That's a good call as well. Is Catherine Austin Fitz the golden calf? She'd probably like that. Yeah. All right. Loved when Dougal said secular modernity is animated by Christian assumptions, like a dwarf hidden under the table manipulating a robot chess player. Yeah, it's adorable. Yeah. I'm listening to from Canada on a cold, almost winter evening with a hot cup of tea. Well, I have a cold cup of tea on a frankly cold morning. Yeah. If the left can produce proper curses, I think it can. Any good spy movie recommendations? Tinker Tailor is good. And Spectre, basically the last couple of James Bonds are good. Spectre is the best description visually of Mr. Global. Yeah. I thought O'Craig did a good job of being Bond. I didn't have a problem with the idea of there being a black Bond next. Yeah. I think a female Bond, it's not the right. I think that would have been too Marvel Comics universe mistake. But I didn't have a problem with it's such an archetypal character. But Tinker Tailor was pretty good. I think I watched a good spy movie this year, maybe. Someone in the chat, tell me recent spy movies. Yeah. Will the coming years produce a growth or a decline in anthroposophist numbers? Decline. I used to talk to Connor about this. Anthroposophy has a voluminous Steiner problem. And the joke is, how many anthroposophists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but we have to check everything that Steiner wrote about light bulbs first. It's a model. It's a system that is trapped in voluminous writings and can't really update. It can only mutate. And it has with like Tom Cowan, and even its, I don't know, cross infection, if you want, with broadly speaking conspiracy world. But generally speaking, the future of anthroposophy is is Steiner's useful contributions to so-called alternative health. I don't think people dive specifically into the frankly kind of turgid esoteric Christianity that is his oeuvre. I think esoteric Christianity gets, I hope anyway, a robust reorganization in the coming few years, and I think it does. I think that's what, like, what's going on with Dugald and so on, and I think the like Paul's turn towards orthodoxy is an understandable sub-variant of that, right? Like, I think that the pivot to orthodoxy is, I share the psychic need to turn to something old and sacred that belongs to me, but not the easy answers, which is mean but is fair, of orthodoxy. Yeah. London Spy was all right. Yeah, that was quite good. Slow Horses. That's what I watched. That wasn't a movie. Slow Horses was fucking great. That was a good show I watched this year. Yeah. All right. This is a good example, Lance, of like why I said some of the useful stuff that comes out of Steiner's medicine, right? Because actually, in Dr. Cowan's Heart book, he talks about this in his webinars, where he did allopathic medical training and found its shortcomings, and then decided anthroposophical medicine seems to work better, but it actually doesn't. Like, some things work. Like, Steiner's right about the heart not being a pump, but some of his treatments just don't work that well. So, yeah. All right. Slow Horses is great. Obviously, anything with Gary Oldman is good, but Slow Horses is great. Doesn't count, Kurt. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, we're coming up on hour 3, which isn't too bad. I think that's the record for these, and with all the technical difficulties as well, not bad. All right, I'm going to give it a moment or two, and if not, I'm going to say my goodbyes and get out of what turned. I'm glad I wore the hoodie, because I thought it was going to warm up, and thought the hoodie would be overkill. But if anything, I'm a little cold. All right. Someone needs to make Tracy Twyman the movie. Shan't be me, but yeah. So there should be a documentary, that's for sure. All right, guys. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrated. Thank you, Elizabeth, and never apologize for cats. All right. See you guys in the next one.